respectfully and respectably. As Christians, we are called to walk godly and upright. Be confident in Christ. We have Christ. Do you have empathy? Do you understand before being understood? This is how Daryl Davis helped bring all those guys out of the KKK just by sitting down with them and understanding them before he forced them to understand him. Because he was open to listen to them. He didn't care if they said something crazy to him. He was like, he knew who he was. He didn't care if they said something racist to him. He was like, whatever. And he would help bring him to the fact that actually he was a human being, a much better man than they were. All right. This next thing, once we change ourselves, get yourself on board with Christ, change your life with Christ, and focus. Work with your family. Impact your children, impact your wife, impact your close relatives. As a family, do you go out and pray for other people? Do you try to connect with other people from other cultures, other ethnic backgrounds, and connect with them, interact with them? I see today we do. We have a lot of people from various backgrounds, which is awesome. Invite those people to your house. Invite them just to supper. Get to know them. This is really important for the next step. Is your family an example for the rest of the community? We as a church have the answer. So as families, let's do that. This important step is as you're building these relationships, you can impact the church and the Christian community and fellowship that you're in. What if every authentic Christian congregation would live out the fruit of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness. If you can just do those things, you're going to be like, wow, those are just amazing reasons. We have this amazing opportunity. As a congregation, are you equally welcoming to people of other ethnic backgrounds? As a congregation, do you focus on the unity of God's kingdom? As a congregation, do you go overboard in forgiveness? Do you go overboard in forgiveness with each other? And I've noted this before, as a congregation, you despise gossip and backbiting. The Bible is so extreme, it says that we should remove those people from the church, actually, those who cause division. So remove yourself from those conversations. At least just step out and be like, God, I don't want to hear it. I've done that to people at work. One guy comes up to me a lot and like, oh, did you hear it? And I'm like, no, sorry. I have other stuff to do. I don't want to hear the word that's gossip. If we can't love our own family, our own church family, how can we expect to fulfill God's command to love our neighbors? And lastly, as a church, as individuals, as families, as a church, we'll impact the culture. We'll impact the community. How do you do this? Homeless missions, awesome opportunity. How about pregnancy centers or being a mentor? These are amazing opportunities that you can impact the culture. How about teaching, parenting, or something like that at some of these places? Or gospel, preaching the gospel at homeless missions. Or something like that. Those are things that you can get out into the community. You try to hire people fairly in your workplace if you're an employer. You encourage a victor versus victim mindset from the culture, from the people around you. These are big things that we can focus on. So we have to start with ourselves and move outward. Start with yourselves and move outward. All right, some resources. If you would like to follow up and learn more, there's a number of resources here that you can check out that I came up with here. This is a Facebook group that I created with a bunch of my friends. Love That Black Neighbor we created over the summer with all the race riots. So I have a bunch of my friends on there that are also passionate about this issue. From different ethnic backgrounds. We're trying to help prevent this being an alternative, one of the alternatives to the BLM movement. WokenTruth.com. It sounds like it could be kind of woke. No, it's not. It's out in this woke, in the spiritual sense. Of a close friend of mine who runs this website. Very solid Christian. I have high respect for him. Actually, I worked with him on this presentation, so he helped me with this presentation a lot. WokenTruth.com. He talks about the issue of racism. EveryBLM.org, this is a great alternative to the BLM movement, or BlackFamiliesMatter.org. Center for Biblical Unity is an amazing place. Slow to Write, I've learned a lot from that gentleman. Shimmy Apologetics, he's from India, and I can't pronounce his name very well. It's a great site. We talked about Bodhi Bachman, Tony Evans, John Perkins. There's some good resources as well. They've written a number of books. I've given you 3 books up here. You can read other books as well. The first book is Uncle Sam's Plantation by Star Parker. She's a lady I talked to you about before. Amazing book. If you want to see a culture change, if you want to see a change in the community, she talks about the gospel. She talks about how we can actually change the culture. Amazing book. I highly recommend it. One Race, One Blood by Charles Ware and Ken Ham. And then Oneness and Grace by Tony Evans. Like I said before, if you want the notes, definitely come to the back and put your name on the thing. I'll send you all these sources. If you want to follow me on Facebook, on Twitter, check me out on Facebook at iapologia.com, Twitter, YouTube. I'm on MeWe, USA Life, Parler, and you can check out our website, iapologia.com. So, we're going to the back table, look at some of my stuff if you like. Right.
That was great preaching. And the Black Lives Matter people need to hear that. And everybody needs to hear that. There's no reason to be racist. If you're in Christ, you have a new mind, new everything. So, Daniel, that would preach well to Pastor Shepherd's church tomorrow since he missed it. Come on up here, Pastor Shepherd. We are at Christian Evidence Expo so honored with the life of Michael Fogel Jr. He was an impact player for this ministry. And I didn't know he was with me from day one. I didn't know that until he passed. But I know he was scheduled to preach for me this year at Zion Unity. And when I got the word he had passed, I was so broken, so emotional. The team could tell you they were there because he was so dear to my heart. And I'm honored tonight as Senior Executive Director to be able to recognize the life of Michael Fogel Jr. Michael Wayne, right? Well, if I miss the middle name, don't worry about it. So, good to have Pastor Shepherd here, and also Pastor Richard to make this presentation to this family. I'm going to ask right now the Fogel family, all of you that's here, please come forward and stand between Pastor Richard and myself. And if you say, I don't know who he is, we have a picture of him on the table, back on our resource table, if you don't know him. And I'm sure if you see that picture, you will remember Michael Wayne Fogel Jr. This, before Pastor, you know, make this presentation, sir. Before Pastor Richard will read this proclamation, this is the 6th Senior Executive Director proclamation since I've been Executive Director. And we give this proclamation for, what y'all breaking? We make this proclamation to recognize individuals that have done far beyond what's expected. This is our 6th one we're getting ready to present, and Sister Ann Imes, you stand up. Stand up. Her and her husband was the last recipients of this award because they have been such a blessing. So Pastor Richard Reynolds will have comments, and then will read this proclamation to Sister Rhonda and to the whole family. And if you start crying, we'll get some Kleenex here.
What we have here is a proclamation, again, honoring Mike for this day and making this his day here at the Expo. And I just want to say that he became a friend of ours. He was a friend. We look forward every year to him being here because we just knew y'all were going to be here. And the fact that he would leave here at the end of the Expo at night, be back the very next night. He was here night after night after night of each Expo. And we were so grateful and we were so honored that he would come. And the family came very faithfully with him, and he brought others as well. But this is what the proclamation says. A proclamation issued by the Creation Evidence Crusade. Now, our organization is called the Creation Evidence Crusade, and we put on the Expo, but we are the Crusade still. It says to honor Mike Wayne Fogel Jr. Whereas Mike Fogel attended the very first Creation Evidence Expo in 2006, and whereas he has attended the Creation Evidence Expo every year since, and whereas he has faithfully brought his family and others with him, and whereas he traveled from another state at great sacrifice, expense, and time to be with us, and whereas Mike's faithfulness and dedication to creation science and to the Creation Evidence Expo has inspired us all, be it known by all that the Executive Director of the Creation Evidence Crusade, Pastor Frederick W. Boyd Jr., speaks on for the entire organization in declaring that Saturday, September 19, 2020, is Mike Fogel Day at the Creation Evidence Expo.
Thank you very much. Excellent. I'm trying to keep my composure. I'm trying to keep my composure. But when you love somebody, you just love them. It's just weird. You know, I love life. He's not only a brother, he's a friend. I believe I'm not like myself in this audience. I believe a lot of us are. Along with the proclamation, we give this little crystal globe that sits on a pedestal and it spins. That means that the person receiving this not only cared about Indianapolis, cared about the whole world. It's a spin right on here. And on this one it says, in loving memory of Pastor Michael Fogel, a man that loved the Lord and the work of Creation Evidence Expo. Pastor Frederick W. Boyd Jr., Senior Executive Director, on 9/20/2019. That's okay. That's not the date. We give you this along with that proclamation, set it somewhere in the house, and just sit on that pedestal and just spin it and say, well, Mike somewhere with the Lord in the globe. So this is a reminder that he was concerned about the whole world, and that's what we're concerned about. So that goes with the proclamation from Creation Evidence Expo.
How far did they drive each day?
What'd you say?
How far did they drive each day?
Sidedale, Illinois, here. I don't know how many, You tell us, Rhonda, I don't know.
From Sidell, it was about 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours they drove here. Wow. And drove back. Night after night. We're not talking about 3 nights, we're talking about 6 nights. They were there. And so that's shows the heart of the champion, somebody that cares about the work of the Lord and creation. And at his homegoing celebration, they talked about how he uplifted creation in this expo, the ministry, and would tell everybody, you need to come here and learn about creation. And he talked with creation around his friends and in the circle of influence. That's the kind of man he was, and we just thank God for God. Last, Pastor Shepherd's got something. The represent. That's a long story of this.
I want to share this because I see first I see the tears, but then I see the smile. And it reminds me of 2 gentlemen that grew up together, they did everything together. And one happened to fall ill and go to the hospital. But his friend would go to see him every day. And they would share with one another. And one day he gets there, and the nurse meets him outside the door. Her head is hung low. And she said, I am so sorry. Your friend is taken. And so he steps over and steps into the room, and he looks at his friend, and he looks back at her with a smile. And he says, no, yes he did. Yes he did. And he also said, guess what? I told him if he gets there before I do, save a place for me. Amen. So this is just a token of appreciation for the work that was done by Brother Folk. God bless you.
And we gave Sister Rhonda some clear instructions. Amen. At this time, we're going to go to the children. Let's introduce yourself so they know who you are. I know. Okay. If you want to say something, introduce yourself. If you want to say something, we definitely want Rhonda to say something when it's all said and done.
I'm Amber. I was his oldest. He was definitely very adamant about teaching his kids the value of creation and seeing the evidence of a creator, and definitely teaching us not only the creation, but he also taught us about what evolution is and how to defend it as a creationist. He was funny, and he definitely knew a lot about creation, and I'm glad that he passed that down to us.
And the one getting ready to speak now, I remember when he was first born. and Mike brought him to the Expo as a baby.
Hi, I'm John. Hello, I'm Michael. I'm 9 years old. I know a lot of people love Dad. He may have passed away, but he's in a better place.
Hello, I'm Stephen Fogel. I was his oldest son, and he was a good man. He loved creation. He loved the Expo and all things to do with creation.
I'm Abby. I'm his 3rd child out of 5, so middle. Me and Dad, we would always come to the Expo. Every year I would ask him, hey Dad, when's the Expo? And, not the whole family was able to come every single night, but I always made it a point to come with him every night and just make it kind of a father-daughter trip, and it just kind of made things special.
Now we're going to let Sister Rhonda Fogel, the wife of Mike, share.
I'm Rhonda.
Mike and I were married for 30 years. And from the time him and I first met at Bible college, he had a passion for creation and the truth of God's Word. And I'm thankful that I'm thankful that he had that passion.
Amen.
Because with that passion, we were able to bring up our children. Still bringing up our children. Teaching them to love God and put first what matters most, and that is a relationship with God. And I know that one day we will see him again. And I'm looking forward to that day.
One last word when we dismiss tonight. Everyone come by and just encourage his family and let them know you're going to pray for them and keep them in your prayers, because it's not easy to go with a companion 30 years. But we can pray, encourage, and stay connected. And I'm personally going to continue to pray for them. And I know Christian and this Expo organization is going to be praying for you guys. And we don't want you to stop coming to Expo. I'll send you, text you the dates. In fact, I'll announce it before we end tomorrow night. Next year's date is going to be 3 nights. We're going to go to a new format, 3 nights. And that's what we'll do starting this year, next year, and years after. But Mike was with us. When I told that congregation, that audience, we're going to bury evolution, he said, Pastor, you're right, I'm going to be with you when you're buried. Now, he's gone home, making preparation for us to come home. And I know we're going to miss him. But I can tell you this one thing, he don't miss us. He's with Jesus. He's with Ellen Perrin. And he's with Dr. John Whitcomb. To God. And one day we're going to be with the Lord too. We didn't know him. So let's give them a great hand. We're going to do a hand clap where I can give you a fist bump. All right. Amen. Thank you very much. God bless you guys. I knew I was going to forget something. I'm getting older. The best is yet to come. Hallelujah. Amen. At this time, we're going to ask our next presenter tonight will be Dr. Jerry Bergman. And what you notice now, he's written, I think, about 50 to 60 books. And what I heard or saw somewhere that he's one of the smartest Americans we have, one of the smartest IQ-wise. I think I read that somewhere, but he's written 50 to 60 books. And every year he cranks out, him and Jay Wild both crank out books galore. But he's writing textbooks. He's just writing books so we know what's going on in creation and how to defend our faith in creation. But Dr. Bergman, I'm so glad he's been a part of us. This is, I think, his 5th year. And well, I didn't miss that. So he's going to share. You want this one or that one?
Wait, does this work all right?
Both will work.
Okay, now this is all right, yeah.
All right, let's listen to Dr. Jerry Bergman at this time. Let's give him a great hand. God bless.
Great to be here. It's something that's really important. Darwinism is the doorway to atheism. And the evidence is very, very clear. Many, many studies have done. Why do people become atheists? Well, they become atheists because they accept Darwinism. I'll spend a few minutes on it. How many people are there that take this path? Well, I've got a whole book, there are many more, but I've got a whole book of well-known people who became atheists through the doorway of Darwinism. And you've probably heard some of these. Karl Marx is one. He was an evangelical Christian. His Christian writing was excellent. He would have had competition with C.S. Lewis. Very, very good writer, C.S. Lewis. But he went to the University of Berlin. He studied evolution, studied philosophy, and he became an atheist. And not only an atheist, but he became a vigorous anti-Christian. And he basically said, religion is the opiate of the people. And that means it just makes them feel good so they can be exploited by the upper classes, the higher classes, the wealthy class, the bourgeois, as he said. Learn a lot about Marxism in his college because the colleges, they really, really push it. They really, really push Marxism. So I know a lot about it. Not willingly, but that's what we had to study for a number of my degrees. We learned all about Karl Marx. But it surprised me his early experience as a Christian. I've read some of his writings, really, really well done. Very well done. And it's too bad he didn't continue along that walk. But he became not only, of course, an atheist, but an anti-vigorous Christian. And he founded the movement called communism. There are others involved as well. Communism basically is anti-religious as a result of his ideas. And this is why wherever communism takes root, we can see that the anti-religion laws begin taking hold. Russia, of course, China, probably the country that Christians are persecuted most in the world today is China. In Cuba, we can see so many countries that have adopted the communist worldview, they accept the atheist worldview as well. And there are many reasons for that, but those are a few of them. Okay, I'll try to go into detail with this. I'm not sure how much of this I'll get through, but when you ask people why they believe in God, and many surveys have asked that very question, and most people say the wonders of creation. That's what they say. Why do you believe in God? Well, wonders of the created world, the animals, the plants, the trees, the sky, all this stuff is why I believe in God. And this is a common response, and this is a common reason people state why they believe in God. Okay, so Darwin knew that. He knew that's why people believe in God. So his whole goal was to murder God. Those are his own words. Well, actually, he said it's like committing a murder. How do you murder God? You destroy the reason people give for believing in God. And therefore, you come up with another creator. That other creator is evolution. And it's competition, direct competition to creationism. And when you look at these animals, and by the way, I have a dog and a cat. I had a dog originally, and someone said, "What's your problem? Don't you like cats?" And I thought, well, yeah, I like cats. We had a cat and a dog at one time, and they loved each other. We used to take walks together. So yeah, I had a cat. So there you go. There's a cat and a dog. Now, how can you look at that and not feel there must be a creator? That must have been created by a God, right? A loving God. In fact, the creation says a lot about the creator. And so your heart melts when you see those critters. We just got a dog now. We just lost, I had a dog for 16 years, Cody. And I'll tell you, I grieved over that dog more than anybody. I know that I wouldn't. Shouldn't say that. But really, it was really difficult. Of course, we were there when he was put down. He had all kinds of health problems. He was going blind. He was deaf. And he was just lots of health problems. And we thought he had progressive heart disease. So we thought, you know, the best thing is to cut him down. And I was there, and I kind of wondered, should I have been there? You know, put him down. So, anyways, okay, I'll define evolution. Evolution is from nothing to everything by, and Bruce Moran does a good job presenting this, so I'll just go through it briefly, by time, chance, natural law. Natural law includes gravity, strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism. So these laws produce everything. Chance is very important. Okay? And I can mention about natural law, gravity. How does gravity work? We don't know. I have a book this thick on gravity, called Gravity. It's a good title. And I thought I would understand how gravity works when I read the book, but they said, we don't know how gravity works. We know it works. That's not doubted. We know.
Pages to say that?
Well, I want to understand how it works. Einstein called this action at a distance. And I'll give you a good example. Gravity is working right now. Could we stop gravity? Put a lead plate between me and the floor. Not going to stop it. How about a vacuum between me and the floor? Not going to stop it. No matter what we put between me and the earth, doesn't matter. It cannot, will not stop gravity. It always goes through everything. And we don't understand how that works. And gravity is, I think I might mention this, but gravity is the weakest of all the forces. But gravity is so strong, it holds Pluto in its orbit. And Pluto is so far away, we didn't discover it until a few years ago because you can't see it because it's so far away. It takes the space probe, what, I forget, 9 years to get to Pluto? And yet the sun, gravity, holds Pluto and all the other planets in orbit. The Earth's gravity holds the moon in orbit very successfully. But yet, I can overcome that far, but I guess if I was good, I could jump pretty high and overcome gravity. But yet, it holds the Earth in orbit. Amazing. Theodosius Zatsky, he described evolution as comprising both biology and cosmology. When you talk about evolution, people say, yeah, but it only explains biology. No, evolution purports to explain everything. So when you're in school, I'll give you, if you're still in school, I'll give you an answer that is correct for whatever question you ask. What causes the Earth to move around the sun? Well, evolution. Where did the Earth come from? Evolution. Where did the sun come from? Evolution. How does the sun work? Well, the sun works by evolution. So it's the answer that answers everything. That answer, you can get every question right. At least on chemistry and science. So evolution, we're talking about the entire universe, everything. I watch a lot of films on astronomy and watch a lot of films on science, period. And I've watched a whole series, about 9 hours, one series on astronomy. And eventually they claim, how did this happen? Where did comets come from? Evolution. Where did this, that, everything else come from? In astronomy, evolution. Evolution explains everything. Okay? How it works. Okay, I'll go through how evolution works. When scientists talk about evolution, sometimes they talk about minor things like minor genetic variations. Minor genetic variations would be mom and dad, kids, are a blend of mom and dad, but yet there are some ways unique. They're like mom and dad, but not totally. In fact, sometimes you wonder, where did he get that trait from? Not from me, it must be from his dad or his mom. And so children are a result of, evolution. Now, we don't question that. That's obvious that our kids are evolving. Obvious they look different than we do. Obvious, hopefully, they're in some ways, they have the best of mom and the best of dad, ideally. Okay, hopefully. Now, the problem is not survival of the fittest, but the arrival of the fittest. So we're talking about mutations produce variety, and that's what evolution says is variety. Mutations produce variety, and natural selection, then survival of the fittest, stronger survive, causes the strongest of those mutations, organisms with them, to survive. Okay? But survival of the fittest is no problem. Obviously, if you're more fit, you're more likely to survive. The problem is the arrival of the fittest. Where did the fittest come from? The problem is, and I've studied this, I taught in medical school for a number of years, did a lot of research in that area, did research actually on mutations. We know that the vast majority, like 99% of all mutations, are either deleterious or near neutral. Near neutral means they're not really lethal, but mistakes that add up. Kind of like your car. Doesn't run quite well, the pedal that you use the brakes on squeaks. In time, battery gets bad, of course you replace it, but in time, after a while, you've driven a car for 200,000 miles. After a time, it's just everything goes. And so that's what near neutral mutations do. They cause minor problems which add up, which eventually causes death. Okay, and that's why we die. That's one major reason we die. Because we have a lot of small things, and the small things add up, and as a result, we die. When my aunt died, and I don't know that she was ever in hospital except to have her child. I don't know if she was ever in a hospital, besides having my cousin. And when she died, I asked the doctor, what did she die of? And the doctor said, well, nothing. Wait a minute. She's not around. She must have died of something. Well, actually, she died of everything. Died of everything. Well, what is it? I mean, he said, okay, Bergman said, you're a doctor. You are, well, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor. I've got 3 years of medical school, but I never studied this. So explain to me what's going on. And he said, okay, what happens is, as you get older, the liver doesn't work as well, the heart doesn't work as well, the veins don't work as well, the veins clog up, muscles don't work as well, the hair doesn't work as well, the vision doesn't work as well. Eventually, all of that adds up, and eventually you die of everything put together. So your aunt, she had heart problems. The heart wasn't that bad, but it wasn't real good. She had lung problems. She had problems added up. And eventually she died. And we doctors, we could say, yeah, she had, this and that and something else, but we only have one line on the death certificate, so we write heart failure. Just as easy. Even though heart failure was produced by a bunch of other things. So we say, okay, I see that. It makes sense. Because you're not going to sit there and say, well, the lungs weren't working quite as good as they should be, and she had to take deep breaths to take in the level of oxygen she needed. Brain wasn't working quite as, right there, he's right, heart failure. Myocardial infarction. That's what they write. So that makes it real simple. They know that you can't go into detail because there's not room. Besides that, who cares? I mean, unless it's murder or something, there's some concern, you just, and she was 80-something when she died, you just write down myocardial infarction, and off you go. Okay, theistic evolution. The problem with theistic evolution is, and so many people, they say, I'm theistic evolutionists, they say that God used evolution. The problem with that is that let's have evidence that evolution is true first. I mean, why talk about whether God did something when we don't have any evidence that evolution occurred? It did not occur. It's unequivocal. It never happened. It couldn't have happened. And therefore, this conclusion is the result of science. I can mention, as I'm learning more and more, including one person here today, was at one time an atheist. He's back there studying something. He was an atheist. And I'm surprised there are so many of us out there who are atheists. And once we study science, guess what? Just the facts did not fit evolution. We study genetics, we study mutations, we realize that you're not going to get anywhere by mutations. You're not going to get a beautiful poem by making mistakes. Typographic errors will never get you anything besides a lot of gobbledygook. It won't happen. It's not going to happen. Therefore, evolution it's not true. Why do people believe in evolution? Well, they believe in evolution for 2 reasons. And I go into this in more detail, but just quickly. They believe in evolution because that's all they learn in school. Right? And they learn it all over. They learn it everywhere. I do a lot of watching the films. And almost all the films talk about evolution. They just assume it's true and this, we evolved and we have this and that. Evolution is how it happened and end of story. But they never, in all the films that I have, they never really explain how it works. I don't think they really care. Evolution explains what we got here. But they don't go into detail as how it could work. By the way, Darwin had no idea how it worked either. He was baffled as to how it worked. He talked about survival of the fittest, but, they couldn't explain the arrival of the fittest. So he admitted that. He says, I don't know how it works. And later on, by the way, he even questioned the whole survival of the fittest idea. So, because there are problems with that, I can go into. So, let's talk about theistic evolution when we have some clear evidence that evolution occurred. Right? And therefore, I dismiss that pretty easily. A lot of people feel, well, I believe in science. God used evolution. Well, the whole point of evolution, the whole purpose of evolution is to murder God. So why in the world would you claim that God used evolution when that's why Darwin developed this idea, to murder God? And by the way, he was enormously successful. If Darwin was around today, he would look around and he would say, I never dreamed I would be this successful. I was enormously successful. The vast majority of eminent scientists, the vast majority are atheists and evolutionists. And I have plenty of data on that. Okay, atheistic evolution posits that matter and energy alone have given rise to all life, everything else. So it's really pretty simple. The problem is all biological systems depend upon information. Okay? And we know the only source of information is intelligence. It's the only source of information. You'll never get information by any other way. And if you figure out a way of getting information some other way, you let me know and we'll write some new Shakespearean books. Push you in the butt. Or whatever we have to do to get it. Starts the idea. We don't know why Darwin was so hated God. The theories are, and this is not denied, that he hated God. When his father died, and when his family went to church, and his family did go to church regularly growing up, and they went to a church in England, and they did go to church, but Darwin could not go into church. He couldn't even go into church for his father's own funeral. He hated God. We're not sure why. One theory is Annie died. Annie was his favorite daughter. And when Annie died, he couldn't get over it. He had a harder time than I had when my dog died. I mean, I don't mean to make light of that, but he really, and I can understand, he had a hard time with that. But he blames it on God. Why did God take my favorite? He should have taken this other one. But no, he has to take Annie. And so, for that, that's one theory as to why he wanted to murder God. But one problem Darwin had was his wife was, her whole life, a creationist. And she died a creationist. She never could accept his idea. She could not accept it. And I should mention that Darwin, I go through this in detail in my book, The Dark Side of Charles Darwin. By the way, that's the only book ever written in history that I know of, and I've looked, that looks at the other side of Charles Darwin. And when you read the other side, you find some interesting things there. You have how to read what he said about women. He said women were stupid. They were illiterate. They were a danger to society. And his favorite child was Annie, a female. And I mention that because Darwin was not a very good writer. He said, I was in tears reading my own writing. Guess who edited in detail his own writing? I bet you'll never guess. His wife. She was fluent in 5 languages. Darwin wasn't even fluent in English. And he admitted that. Because I tried to read Darwin. I really tried hard to read it. I couldn't do it. It just did not flow. It did not make sense. And I read science pretty effectively. I read a lot of science. And it flows, but it just doesn't flow. I don't know. Has anybody tried to read Darwin? Have you been? What's your experience?
Oh, I mean, he's very plotting, but I mean, on Origin of the Species, everyone should read. So everybody should read The Descent of Man as well. It's it's a slog, but it's no worse than. I mean, I think he's a better writer than Victor Hugo.
Oh.
If you've ever read Victor Hugo, he puts you to sleep.
Okay. Now, I've read a lot of sections of Darwin, and that's okay, I guess, because I know where he's going. But plodding along, I have a hard time because I wonder, where's he going?
Yeah, it's true.
What's
He
the
is
point of
plot.
this? So reading sections, I've read a lot of sections. That's why I thought I'd read the whole thing. Because I've read many, many, many sections, but it's just, the whole thing is, I had a hard time. I just gave up. Anyway, there's Emma, his wife, and there's Annie, the second picture's in. And there's Emma. And Emma was an attractive young lady. And I tell you the story of how he married Emma. That was his cousin, his first cousin. So they grew up together. They knew each other well. And he came back from his trip around the world, 5-year voyage. And he sat down and said, to marry or not to marry? What's the pros of marriage and not marrying? And he said, marriage is like being a slave. But there's many happy slaves, and so he married Emma. Now, I don't know how many slaves there were, but that's what he said. And Emma, he went over to her, because they were cousins, first cousin. He went over to the house, and he basically proposed to her. And Emma didn't know whether he was serious. But she didn't want to take a chance, because she was late 20s. You know, just like women back in that day start to worry. I mean, a spinster, not a good thing. So she basically said yes, didn't want to take a chance. Because if he really was serious, she thought, well, she better say yes, because this might be my last chance to get married. And so they did get married, and they, by the way, they did have a good marriage. And stories admit that they had a very good marriage. Anna was his favorite daughter. She was very much like Emma. And Emma she was a really good woman. She was a very doting wife. She played the piano for Darwin. She read to him. She was just really a good wife. I don't know how she survived the marriage today, but back then she did. And there's my book, The Dark Side of Charles Darwin, which again is the only critical analysis of this icon of science. And there are a number of reviews, most are favorable, but there are a number of reviews, and they basically attack me because it's all one side. Well, I'm trying to show one side. And that's the point of the book. Thousands of books that show the other side. I want to show one side. Okay, National Geographic, they had a story in there which Darwin wrong, and of course they go through the claims that were made against Darwinism, and they say, oh, he was right. And I just thought, this is so naive. And as I read, I wondered, what's going on here? And my conclusion is, and I'm not persuaded by the evidence, and there I give my testimony as well as the testimony of other people. And basically what we were saying is we accepted the creation worldview because of the evidence. We talk a lot about having faith, and that's faith's important, of course. But in many ways, it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a theist. And we know Darwinism is the engine that drives atheism. Richard Dawkins, some of these quotes are really helpful. They say, Richard Dawkins said, he's the most famous atheist in the world now. And he said, evolution allows one to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. What? Allows you to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Before evolution, you couldn't be an intellectually fulfilled person. Now, with Darwin, you can be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. The case against Darwin, as I mentioned, is overwhelming. I've written 30 books to talk about that. And yet, among the top scientists, and this is shown by surveys, of the top scientists, about 98% are atheists. And atheists, this is just people who are part of the National Academy of Sciences. Not the top scientists, but fairly well-known scientists. And 65% were atheists. 29% are agnostics. Only 6% were theists. Now, why do they believe this? Because this is all they hear. When I was at the medical college, I would talk to some of my colleagues about the evidence for evolution. Well, I don't really think about it. It's true. It's scientific consensus, so I don't know. You have to read some books about it. I can't talk about it. Well, they can't. At least the leading scientists, we can see about 90% leading scientists deny the existence of God, reject life after death, and reject directed evolution, which means theistic evolution. So they reject theistic evolution. And then we're talking about biologists in 4-year and 2-year colleges. About 60-some% are atheists or agnostics. So when you go to college, chances are most of your professors, especially biologists, at least 60%, will be atheists. So no wonder so many people are atheists, because of indoctrination from colleges. And here at major research universities, we have even more atheists and agnostics. And the Los Angeles Times said they define intelligent design as a theory that intelligent being, rather than personal forces such as Darwinian natural selection, is responsible for life. So that's a pretty good definition. So are impersonal forces responsible for life? or is life the result of intelligence? And that's the question. And the majority of scientists, zeal to Darwinism has been proved beyond a doubt. So the overwhelming majority believe that life is not the result of intelligent forces. Amazing. Social factors, we believe what people around you believe. And we see that as we talked earlier about racism. Why history? Why historically have so many people been racist? Well, because I was taught in school. I did a PowerPoint, which maybe next year I can present it, and I show that all of the biology books, without, or with very few exceptions, openly taught racism for the first 50 years in this country. How do they teach racism? Invariably, they had a picture of a monkey, a Caucasian, and right in the middle was obviously a Negro. They use that term, I don't use that term. Because, you know, there's only one race, the human race, so we're all people groups. That's a much better term. And by the way, 1 out of 5 marriages now in this country are interracial. 1 out of 5. So if you don't have an interracial marriage, what's your problem? What's the matter with you? So 1 out of 5, that's the latest statistic. And my perception is it's probably going to be going up. Probably 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but when I taught college, I was amazed at how many interracial marriages there were. So that's, by the way, that it's like we got a new dog, and you want to stay away from thoroughbreds. What kind of dog do you want? A mutt. Yeah. You want a mixture. You want really healthy kids. I don't mean to demean anybody here, but you want really healthy kids, what do? You marry someone of another race. Right? That's the way to have healthy kids. And studies have shown, by the way, they are healthier. Kids, when they have a mom of one race and dad of the other race, the level of people who have Tay-Sachs disease, rare. The level of people who have sickle cell anemia, almost unknown. The level of people who have, coughing disease, you got to put the kids on your back, hit their back. Cystic fibrosis is known. Cystic fibrosis, okay. Those diseases are almost unknown among interracial marriages. And that's true with so many interracial marriages, you don't have those problems. So, okay, evolution's everywhere. Like I say, I watch a lot of videos of science, and invariably they cover evolution somewhere. And then I wrote a book called Slavic Dissonance, which shows, in essence, we have social pressure against people who question evolution. Another cover. And fortunately, I was able to get a lot of press. This is the front page article of done on my work. And I was featured on the front page of Toledo Blade, which is the largest paper in the Toledo area. And you can see, I talked about the whole intelligent design issue. And you can see, this is my office at the college. And Expel, if you haven't seen that, you should. Every church should show it. Partially because we have the problem where so many young people raised as Christians, they go to high school, they go to college, and they leave the faith of their parents. And when I taught 45 years in college, and I had no small number of professors tell me, in essence, no matter what I teach, my goal is to make the students as unlike as their parents as possible. We want to make them very different from their parents. And that's their goal. And obviously very successful because so many young people are alienated from their parents and from the church because of the indoctrination in colleges. And when you mentioned some of these in earlier talk on racism, I heard at the college 10 years ago this white privilege, which is, I think racism, but white privilege. And by the way, the suicide among whites is like 4 times higher than among blacks. But they were so happy and so privileged, why are they killing themselves? So with blacks, even abortion is a major killer. Among Caucasians, suicide is a major killer. So it's huge. And so therefore, we have a group of young people which are so different. And that's tragic. Other things I heard over and over was, besides white privilege, I heard systemic racism, which somebody here just mentioned. What's systemic racism? I forget who that was. Somebody here mentioned about systemic. What's systemic racism? It means racism in the system. I don't know. Do you see that? A number of my relatives are black, and I know they're doing pretty well. And I asked them, Aunt Marcella, who's in Kansas, I talked about that. She says, well, you know, she was 90-something. And she said, you know, things have really changed. When she was a little girl, her father shot her mother. And I'll never forget that. She saw the spark from the gun, and that killed her mother. And I said, what happened to your father? And she said, got 6 months. Why? Black on black crime. 6 months. That's all. And I couldn't believe that. And she did later on say that her father was injured in a railroad accident and he was not all with it. But he was with it enough where he knew what murder was. So in 6 months would be appropriate. The problem is we can see life is designed. You study things like insects. Now you may not be in love with insects, but if you have time, if you get a fly to pose for you, it's amazing how well they're designed. Of course, I had the medical school. I went and got some box elder bugs, and I put the box elder bugs on the scanning electron microscope. SEM, loved SEM, best course I had at the medical school. And I was amazed at how well these critters were designed. You know, when they're in your room, urinate on your food, and that's what they do, by the way. They digest externally. They excrete on your food, and then that dissolves like the stomach. And that dissolves the food, and they suck the food up. So when they're on your hamburger, it's not a good thing to have flies in your hamburgers. When they're on your food, you're not too enamored with them. But if you think about it, they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. Not as beautiful as a puppy, but you know, I think they're just really well designed. And when you watch a lot of films on nature, flukes and these critters, they're incredibly beautiful, some of these critters. And flatworms and platyhelminthes and so on. They're just incredibly beautiful, some of these critters. And some of you I know don't appreciate those critters. On the other hand, you wonder why they're so beautiful. I think God made them beautiful for our enjoyment. Because I don't think each other enjoys. They can't look at each other and say, oh, you're gorgeous. Of course, they can't talk, so flatworms can't talk. But anyways, Francis Crick said, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. So when you're looking at whatever, a flatworm, it looks like it was designed. But you got to constantly keep in mind, this wasn't designed and evolved. That's an amazing statement. Some evolutionists have made incredible statements. Another one is Richard Dawkins said, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose, but they weren't. They look like they're designed for a purpose. I taught anatomy for many years at the medical school, and I'm just amazed at how well the body is designed. And I know when you're 70 or 80, you know, it's starting to, because of sin, etc., but my dog only lasted 16 years, and he had everything wrong with him. He was blind, he couldn't see right, he couldn't hear, his heart was bad, his lungs were bad. He's falling apart at 16. Whereas we're at 16, we're just young kids, basically. And so if you think, and many animals only live a few hours. Fruit flies only live, 3 days? And so therefore, we are really well designed to last as long as we have lasted. How many cars last for 80 years? And tell them, we can fix them. We can replace the motor. We can replace parts. Think about it, people were really well designed. Not only well designed, but were over designed. We have 2 kidneys. We don't need 2 kidneys. We got a spare. Handy to have it because in case one goes bad, you got the other one. Okay, we have 2 lungs. Same purpose. You can pull one lung out, you're okay. May not be able to run a marathon, but you're okay. You pull a kidney out, you'll be all right. In fact, when I mentioned this, I had a student every now and then that said, I only have 1 kidney. When did you learn that? Oh, when I was 18. You mean you didn't notice anything? No, it's fine. Didn't notice anything. My single kidney worked fine. How'd you discover it? Well, I broke my arm and they discovered it when they were doing X-ray. And you didn't know that till you were 16. Some of you might only have one kidney, never know it. Don't have a reason to know. So we're over-designed. We have so many extra parts. And we have so many parts when you can take out your spleen. Normally, that's okay. Other body parts will fill in the role. They'll take over the role of your spleen. So you're over-designed, and that screams design. I had one student who said that there must be a God when I mentioned that, you know why trees lose their leaves in the fall? So when it snows, the snow doesn't knock them over. That's why they lose their leaves. And so the student said, there must be a God. Why would trees lose their leaves just at the right time and not have them? Now, of course, if you have pine needles, it doesn't, because that doesn't retain the snow, and they're designed to eat trees. So even trees are well designed. Okay, you ready? A Nobel Prize chemist said we all believe evolution as an article of faith that we evolved, that life evolved from dead matter on this planet. But its complexity is so great, it is hard for us to imagine that it did. Hard for us to imagine evolution is true. I don't have that good of imagination, I guess, so I have a problem. And then Professor Whitting Smith said, I'm convinced that Darwinism is not, in fact, a scientific theory, but a pseudo-metaphysical hypothesis decked out in scientific garb. It's there. These quotes are there. And that's why I've often said, at first, you believe in evolution. When you read, you realize, upward you hear it, you read that couldn't be true. So the key to helping people overcome the evolution blockage is more reading, more study. And you probably know Ben Carson. He was always one of my heroes. I got a chance to, I wrote an article about him and he reviewed it. I said he was the greatest neurosurgeon in the world. And he changed that. He didn't want me to say that. So pull that word right out. Just didn't, or one word. So he just said he's a neurosurgeon. And anyways, he said when he was growing up, his mother was illiterate. She couldn't read. And so she realized she had to do something to help her boys because they were in big trouble. In Detroit. I'm from Detroit. In big trouble. Her husband, she found, was a bigamist. He left. Here she was, third grade education, tried to take care of two boys. And that was a problem. And she realized one way is to help them do well in school. And one way of doing that is make them get a book from the library, Detroit Public Library, which I went to a lot in Detroit. Detroit Public Library, and they had to take out 2 or 3 books every week and read them and give them a book report to their mother. Of course, she couldn't read the book report, but they didn't know that. And so they read, and look how well they've done. If you read about Ben Carson, he was incredible as a pediatric neurosurgeon. There were movies about him. I don't know any other neurosurgeon where there's movies about him. Go to the library, just Ben Carson, gifted, man with gifted hands, I think it's like, you must show that in your church. It's kind of gory in places, but just shows it older kids. And so he did well. And so I know it's too late for a lot of you, but if you have young kids, got a few young kids here, make them read 2 or 3 every week books. 2 or 3 or 4 books. Kids' books, doesn't matter. You learn a lot from the books written for 3rd graders. Just let them read. And as they read more and more, they will end up doing better in school, and school will be easier. This is one, I guess, advantage. I was always a voracious reader. I read. And therefore, I didn't always get A's, especially English. I got D's in English. Hard to write. I guess I was like Darwin. But you got A's in science, and yet I always scored in the 99th percentile in all the exams I took. I'm sure the reason was because I read a lot. And I noticed my grandkids, they get straight A's, but they only read the books they have to for school. They don't read anything else. So they do well grade-wise, but they really have a lot of holes in their knowledge because they're not well read. And you get so much in textbooks, and it's biased, and that's all. You've got to read both sides. And therefore, I know it's hard for parents to do that, but get after your kids, read. And turn the TV off, turn the computer off, sit down, read a book, and that should go along. Okay, I'll finish this up. Carl Sagan, by the way, I got this quote wrong. Someone corrected me and I can fix it. But the cosmos is all there ever was or ever will be. And that was Cosmos, one of the most successful science films ever produced. What does that say? The cosmos is all there ever was or there ever will be. In other words, materialism, physical stuff, all there ever was and all there ever will be. No God, no spirits, no angels, nothing. It's teaching that. Isn't that teaching religion? Isn't that unconstitutional? Well, I don't think so. Anyway, so in Lothrop, he said, I believe that one day the Darwinian myth will be ranked as the greatest deceit in the history of science. The Darwinian myth. He is Swede, and I corresponded with his son, Peter Lothrop, and I wanted to reprint his book. And Peter said, you can reprint it, but it cannot be printed by any creation or intelligent design publisher. And I couldn't find a non-creation or intelligent design publisher, so I couldn't reprint it, but I said, why? He says, well, because I'm not a creationist or an intelligent design supporter. I believe in evolution. Didn't you learn anything from Dad? Guess not. Anyways, the Christian creation story is, at the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This requires intelligence, God's active force, purpose, plan, design, variety. And that's why the heavens declare the glory of God, Hebrews 2:20. And the Darwinian creation story basically is reject God. And there you can see Steve Hawking. And I read his latest book, and it's incredible what he teaches. He said, we know evolution is true because we know it's true. Creation is not true because, well, all scientists are evolutionists, so therefore evolution must be true, basically. And I was appalled. He really could not give any evidence for evolution. And he concludes, the universe arose from nothing. The laws of nature are an accident of the particular slice of the universe we happen to inhabit. No God is necessary. God may exist, he says, but science can explain the universe without the need for an intelligent creator. God is the name people give for the reason we are here. And he said, I think the reason is the laws of physics. That's why we're here. Given a time, the impossible becomes possible, the possible probable, and the probable virtually certain. One only has to wait. Time itself performs the miracle. So life is a miracle. Given enough time, hey, it's bound to happen. If you believe that, I have a bridge I'd like to sell you. Cheap. Only $1 million. It's in Brooklyn. But a new way to rationalize evolution is a multi-universe theory. There are, they say, many, many universes. What's the evidence for that? None. Only universe we know is the one we are in, and that's it. And Daniel Dennett admits Darwin is the corrosive acid that affects everything. Yeah, it sure does. Everything. That's most of the books I've written deal with that issue. And Harvard paleontologist Simpson said that is the result of a purposeless and natural process that did not have him in mind. Boy, that would make your day. What a nice thing to say. And Darwin wrote, there seems to be no more design in organic beings and in the action of natural selection than the course which the wind blows. Talk about pessimistic. And that's a good place to stop. Here's Richard Dawkins' book. I could mention, I can't get any more copies of my book. I've got 5 copies left. You can buy them on Amazon, I think, but I think they want $24. So, and some of the other websites, but we can't get any books from the publisher for some reason, so I don't know what's going on anyway, so I think it's maybe censorship, but who knows. But anyways, I have 5 copies left, and once those are gone, I have a few more at home, but I promise to send those to Bruce. That's it.
I think I got a few copies.
You got a few copies? Okay. Good.
Outstanding, wasn't that outstanding? Thank you, Dr. Bergman, for that great lecture. I'm glad I'm saved. Anybody want to join me tonight? Are you sure you're saved? That was a weak response. Amen. I want to remind us, I haven't done this for a few years, but as Dr. Bergman was speaking, we're losing 1,600 pastors monthly that's walking away from the faith. 5,000 churches close every year. Almost 3 million people of faith are walking away. And 92% of our Christian boys and girls that go to secular universities do not come back to our churches. But I got some good news. Creation is winning over evolution. And very soon, we're going to bury evolution. We have before a song by Elder Parent, my brother-in-law, sister pastor, we have another presentation to make here tonight. This is on Mike Fogel night here at the Expo. And come on, Pastor Charles, come on up here again. And as they're switching out, getting ready to hear from Dr. J. Amen. And that's not the basketball player. This is the scientist. So Sister Laura Shields, who is one of our board members, coordinator, volunteers, she's going to come now. We have something special we want to give her at this time. Amen. And I'm going to let Pastor Shepherd say the words here on this presentation.
This is truly a pleasure and an honor. If you guys know Sister Laura, I missed her last night so much. I went to a room where there was nothing there.
Okay, I'm responsible for bringing refreshments to mail. There was no food, they missed.
I didn't say anything about refreshments. I just said I missed her. But she is probably one of the most wonderful individuals. If you had a chance to pass away, she always greets you with a smile. She always makes you feel welcome. I don't think she ever meets a stranger. And we're just grateful to the Lord to have her in our midst and part of this great movement. Sister Laura Shields, it's my pleasure to present you with the 10-year pin for being with the Creation Evidence Expo.
You got to say something here now. You're going to try to slip off.
They're going to let you sing.
And not only does she do a great job with refreshments, getting coordinating the volunteers and so forth, but every one of our team meetings, thank God for Sister Laura, we get some donuts and fruit and nuts and whatever. She wanted to make sure we don't lose too much weight. Amen. Sister Laura, you shared congratulations for 10 years with us. Amen. Before you speak, all of us that spent 10 years, including our presenters with Creation and Sexual, please stand so you can see all of the. And Jay, you haven't got your pen yet. We'll make sure we get your pen. All right. Okay. The rest of them are somewhere around, just back in the youth. So, all right, Sister Laura. Special words.
Special words. Wow. I have this nice title of volunteer coordinator. You know how I got the volunteer coordinator? He says, I want you to do this. It's like, no, I don't want to do this. No. And 2 years go by. No, you need to be our coordinator, blah, blah, blah. I got tired of saying no, it's fine. So I basically do whatever they need to do. But I'm beloved because I bring food. I mean, I don't care what you say, the weight on man's heart is your son. You feed people, beloved.
Thank you. She's definitely a servant. That's it, a servant. And we thank God that she's been a part of us, and what a blessing. I've got one, and tomorrow night we'll have all of our team come so you can applaud them and thank them for the service. They work with me so diligently, and I thank God for every one of them. And I know sometimes it can be kind of rough. I have my rough edges. But they stick with me and pray for me, and I thank God for this team creation in this expo. Amen. All right, thank you, Pastor Charles. Now we will have a song by my assistant pastor and brother-in-law, Elder Leroy Perrin will come. He's one of our staff persons, and he just does what's necessary. So, and he's going to be accompanied by Sister Sean, and she's another part of the team. She's going to play for him. So a song by Elder Perrin at this time. And notice I didn't put myself on the program to sing tonight. What you laugh about today? Amen. Here you go. And then Pastor Richard will come back and introduce our last speaker.
Lord hates the day when my faith shall be silent. The clouds be rolled back like a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. Help me sing that. And the Lord is the. Come on, if you believe it. My faith shall be silent. Guess what? The clouds be rolled back like the scroll. The scroll shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Yeah! Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Oh, my soul. Oh, my soul. Now listen, I don't know if you can say this. You may not be able to say it, but if you really believe it, you can say it. It is well. It is well with my soul. With my soul. Yes. It is well. It is well with my soul. Amen.
We're going to have one more speaker, so y'all stand up. You've been sitting a little while. We'll just let you stretch. Just have a second here. If you want to. You don't have to, but if you want to stand, stretch a little bit, this is your opportunity to do that. We're going to have one more presentation tonight. All righty. You can be seated when you want to. If you want to continue to stand, that's okay. Dr. J. Wild has been with us for several years. He came to us, and every single lecture is just absolutely wildness.
Amen.
He's even done some debates for us. We've had evolutionists come and debate a couple of years. We had a professor from Kentucky come up, and those were always very, very entertaining and informative. We appreciated that so much. Dr. Wild is a supporter of our Expo, our organization, a sponsor. He not only presents, but he invests in our Expo every year. We are so grateful for Dr. J. Wild, the impact that he has had on our organization and on all of us as individuals. So we are excited about the final lecture for tonight. Dr. J. Wild, it's in your hands. Dr. J. Wild, make you feel very welcome. Please.
Thank you. I have to say, I love the gold top on the mic. I feel kind of like Britney Spears, right? So that hymn, one of my very favorites. If you don't know the story, look it up. It was written by Horatio Spafford. He lost his 4 daughters, and they were going to England. His wife sent him a telegram that said, "Survived alone." He was on his way by ship to England, and he wrote those words over the place where he lost his, where his 4 daughters were. It's really remarkable. That's what the Christian life is. So anyway, my talk's going to be a little different. I want to talk mostly about some data that I just think are incredibly fascinating, incredibly exciting, and it's all fairly new, at least in science terms. You know, science has been around for quite a while, but back in 2005, 15 years ago, a scientist by the name of Mary Schweitzer did something that I was told in university and when I was a grad student definitively could never be done. She found soft tissue in a dinosaur fossil. Now, she wasn't looking for it. She had to end up breaking the fossil to get it out. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to break fossils. They're like Ming vases. They're too precious, right? But she had to break the fossil in order to do what she needed to do. And inside the femur, which is the bone between the knee and the hip, she found what looked like soft tissue. And in fact, she said this part here is elastic. If you grab these two parts with the forceps and pull, that'll stretch out, and then when you release it, it'll go right back. And that was inside the dinosaur fossil, and she said, look, this has got to be soft tissue from the dinosaur, right? Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense because laboratory studies indicate that soft tissue dies really, really quickly, decays away unless there's some way of preserving it. Even if I look at the proteins, the very molecules that make them up, based on our understanding of molecules, these molecules are only stable for about 30,000 years. So the very molecules that make all this up should have decayed away long ago, right? If this is really 65 million years old. And so, she said she didn't think that she thought that the fossils really were 65 million years old, but she said, obviously, what we think about soft tissue isn't right, because it's been around for a lot longer. This is from 65 million years ago. Well, at first, everybody wanted to retain the status quo. Everyone wanted to believe what I had been definitively taught, that there's no way to get soft tissue from dinosaur fossils. So they thought maybe it was something else. Maybe, for example, bacteria invaded the fossil fairly recently, and bacteria tend to leave behind these films, the general term is bacterial biofilms, that tend to look a lot like tissue. So here's a bacterial biofilm, and notice it has sort of the same shape as the soft tissue did, And so they thought, maybe it's bacterial biofilms. But Mary Schweitzer did some other analysis, some chemical analysis, and what she found was that the proteins inside this soft tissue that she had was exactly typical for what a reptilian animal would make, but not something bacteria would make. So she made a pretty convincing case that was really dinosaur tissue. Now, since that became kind of popular, a lot of creationists kind of thought this is really cool. I wonder if we tried to carbon date this tissue, what it would carbon date as. Well, Mary Schweitzer worked for this guy. She worked under the auspices of his museum. His name's Jack Horner, and he's kind of a popular paleontologist. If you've heard of a paleontologist, you've heard about him. He's kind of this cowboy figure that goes in and tries to get fossils wherever he can, whether or not they're exactly legal and all of that. So he's kind of this cowboy paleontologist. He is in charge of the museum under which she was working. So a group of creationists got together and came up with $10,000, and they offered him $10,000, his museum, a grant of $10,000, if they would simply carbon date this tissue, try and see how old carbon dating says it would be. And he refused this free $10,000. Now, the $10,000 was going to include was going to be above and beyond the cost of dating the tissue. So he was going to get this tissue dated for free. He was going to get $10,000 for his museum, and he said no because, quote, the spin creationists can get off of it is not going to help us. And so he refused to let this tissue be carbon dated. Eventually, they even expanded the grant, and they said, okay, we'll not only give you $10,000. We'll not only pay for you to test the tissue, but we'll let you test 4 other artifacts. We'll pay for that too. Anything in your museum you want to carbon date, we'll pay for that too. And he still said no, right? Because he's convinced that stuff's 65 million years old, and he doesn't want any nasty, annoying data to say otherwise. So that's kind of unfortunate. But since Schweitzer did this in 2005, scientists thought, maybe what we've been told definitively since day one isn't true. And so they started looking for soft tissue in all sorts of dinosaur bones. And guess what? They found it all over the place. They found, and I'm going to give you a lot of examples of that. This is the one that's most interesting because it's led to what I consider the most exciting results to me. So I'm going to spend a little more time on this singular discovery. I'm going to talk about one other as well. So this is a Triceratops skull. And a Triceratops skull itself is really, really valuable. Some creationists were excavating some fossils, and they found one horn, not from this skull, but just one horn. And by itself, a horn isn't all that valuable. So they thought, I wonder if we can find some soft tissue in this horn. And so they did, what you would do to try and get rid of any non-tissue in a biological sample. They soaked it in a weak acid. What a weak acid will do is it will chemically react with the minerals, but it won't chemically react with anything organic, any tissue-like stuff. I don't know if you've ever done a great experiment where you put an egg in vinegar overnight. Bowl of vinegar, put an egg in it overnight. Next morning, the shell of the egg is gone. Vinegar is a weak acid. It eats away at that calcium carbonate and reacts with it. And the calcium carbonate gets turned into carbon dioxide and stuff. And so in the end, the shell is gone, but you have an intact egg because right under the shell is a membrane of tissue. And the weak acid doesn't affect the tissue at all because it's not strong enough. A strong enough acid will affect the tissue, but a weak acid will take away the minerals but not touch the tissue. So that's what they did. They used a very weak acid to be very, very careful. And so they actually had to set it in that weak acid for a month, not overnight, in order to see if anything else was there. And sure enough, what they had at the end was a bunch of really soft, elastic brown tissue. Now, of course, this tissue could be anything, so microscopic analysis was done of the whole setup and so forth. And when they looked at it under a light microscope, which is the easiest thing to do, this is what they found. And this is exactly what you expect for bone. Bone is composed of cells, right? Because bone is living. It's got to be composed of cells. And bone cells have a very specific structure that no other cells in the body have. They're called osteocytes. And an osteocyte has a cell body, but then it has all of these little extensions called filopodial extensions. Remember, in science, we have to make the words tough, or anybody can do science, and that's bad. So we have to make the words really tough. We can't just call these arms or something like that. We have to call them filopodial extensions. But that's what they are, and they allow the cells to communicate with each other. These filopodial extensions overlap, and the cells can communicate that way and figure out what needs to be done to keep them healthy and all that kind of stuff. And in hard bone, these cells are arranged in circles called Haversian systems, because the guy who discovered this was named Haversian. And so anyway, this is what they saw, and they said, okay, this has got to be bone, and this is a horn made of bone, so this is obviously from the dinosaur. Now the question is, are these cells petrified? Are they fossil cells, or are they just cells that are dead and still soft? So they went to a scanning electron microscope, and they looked in here. Here are 3 bone cells. And once again, you see the filopodial extensions coming out of the cell body. This little bar is 20 millionths of a meter wide. That gives you an idea of the scale here. So every one of these little filopodial extensions is less than a millionth of a meter wide. And yet, none of them are hard. None of them are petrified. They're dead, but they're soft. In the peer-reviewed paper, the scientist who discovered this wrote, he said, quote, filopodial extensions, these guys, were delicate and showed no evidence of any permineralization or crystallization artifact and were therefore interpreted to be soft. So these are dead but soft cells from a dinosaur. Right? Now that's revolutionary. That's absolutely revolutionary. So, how did evolutionists respond to this wonderful news that we can now look at dinosaur cells? They fired the guy. Named Mark Armitage. He was fired from his position at the university. Now, the story itself is kind of interesting because, he published this in the standard peer-reviewed literature. The journal's called Acta Histochemica, well-known scientific journal. He didn't get fired for publishing the paper. At least he doesn't think so. I've spoken with him personally a few times. He thinks what got him fired was when his paper was published, students found out that there was a place they could go to see dinosaur cells. And so a lot of students were, even students who weren't studying science necessarily, were just fascinated with the idea of going to see dinosaur cells. So he had this basically from the time he would start in the morning till the time he left, he would have 5 or 10 students throughout the day come down and say, hey, can I see the dinosaur cells? And they would hit. Mark would say, sure, of course. So he'd show them, and show them how he uses the microscope and everything. And he thinks that's what got him fired. Because the evolutionists there at the university were sick and tired of trying to explain how there could be dinosaur cells at their university. Right? And so he thinks that's what he got fired. But we do know that he learned about being fired because a university official stormed into his office and said, quote, "We are not going to tolerate your religion in this department," end quote. He should have said that because that ended up making a lawsuit and that ended up being actionable and so forth. So Armitage has settled with the university for a, quote, "undisclosed amount of money," end quote. And so as a result of that, he's been able to continue his research. And what he's done is just truly fascinating. So the first thing he did, remember, here are the dinosaur cells, but you know what this background is? This background is bone. It's still in the fossil, right? So, first thing he did was he extracted it from the bone. He ended up getting this. This is a dinosaur cell floating in liquid. Completely soft. I'm going to tell you where to go to see some videos of this stuff in a minute. He actually has a video where he shows it flopping around in the liquid because it's completely soft. And you know, there's a nucleus right there. And you know, it's most likely, even if it's only a few thousand years old, the DNA is really decayed. But nevertheless, there's probably DNA in there. If we could get enough of these cells, we could probably learn some stuff about Triceratops DNA. He's also got some Nanotyrannus cells and a couple others. But anyway, this is really, really exciting stuff. And of course, he gets fired from the university because this is really, really hard to explain if that cell's 65 million years old. If you know the name P.Z. Myers, P.Z. Myers has tried to discredit this completely. But in the end, when he tried to discredit it, he said that this could be fungus or something like that. And it was pointed out to him that this has all the shapes and characteristics of a bone cell and nothing of the shapes and characteristics of fungus and so forth. So P.Z. Myers' end quote was, "Well, it's just weird." Yeah, I agree, it's weird. You know, he said strange. It's just strange. Yeah, it's strange. It's strange if you think that's 65 million years old. But it's not strange if this is only a few thousand years at all. He's also found blood vessels in these dinosaur fossils. So these clumps here are other things, but these little tubes here are blood vessels. And it's not just because they look like vessels. You know, these could be fungal hypha or all sorts of different other things. But there are certain tests you can run on tissue under a microscope. There are things called fluorescent stains, and if you mix the tissue with fluorescent stains, one type of tissue will make the fluorescent stain do one thing, another type will make it do another thing. This stuff behaves exactly as you would expect blood vessels to behave under these stains. So this really is a blood vessel, all right? This is the coolest thing. If you look at some of these blood vessels, some of them must have been veins because they have what are called vein valves. Now, your arteries don't have any valves in them because the blood is pumping through your arteries under a lot of pressure from the heart. So that always goes the right way. Your arteries don't have to have valves. However, when the blood's coming back to your heart through the veins, the pressure is very low. And it's possible for the pressure to drop to the point where the blood would actually flow backwards in the vein, and that's really bad. So veins have one-way valves that when the blood is flowing properly, the valve is open. But as soon as the blood tries to flow the wrong way because of low pressure, the valve closes. Really good design feature. Anybody trying to move fluid through a low-pressure system would design something like this because it's necessary to keep the blood flowing in the proper direction. If I look, this is, a side view in a drawing. If I look from the top down under a microscope, this is what one of those vein valves look like. So there's the vein itself. And so inside the vein, there's this very, very thin tissue. And you see there's a flap here. And if you can imagine it, there's a flap underneath that flap as well. And that's what makes the valve. And if the blood's flowing the proper way, the flap's open. And if it tries to flow the wrong way, it's closed. Now, this is really, really, really thin tissue. This gives you an idea. This bar would be 5 millionths of a meter wide. This is really, really thin tissue. I have tried to find vein valves in animals that I dissect. And I'm not a great biologist, so I'm not a great dissector, but I've been dissecting since I was at university. I have not been able to get an intact vein valve from any dissection I've done because they're so delicate, I end up breaking them. That's just really, really hard. This is a vein valve from a dinosaur. this delicate thing that I can't get out of a recently dead preserved animal is in dinosaur fossils. So there's the valve, and you can see this is one half of the flap, and there's the other half of the flap. So this guy's actually open. This guy's actually closed, so the entire valve is flat now. So that's the closed valve, and that's the open valve. So this is in dinosaur fossils. Soft, thin tissue in dinosaur fossils. Really, really incredible. And it doesn't stop there. He's actually found nerves in these dinosaur fossils as well. So nerve cells have a very, very specific shape. There's a cell body that contains the nucleus and everything, and that's usually the small part of the cell. The long part of the cell is called the axon, and that's what the cell sends its signals down the axon. It receives the signals from dendrites, processes it in the cell body, and then sends the signal out through the axon. The axon is insulated by a myelin sheath, and that myelin sheath has little sections to it. And every one of these little breaks is called a node of Ranvier. And so it's a very specific thing, and when you see a nerve under the microscope, you see it. Well, that's what he's got here. This is an axon, and you don't see the cell body, but once again, this reacts to a stain the way a nerve ought to react to a stain. And once again, the blue arrows there point out these nodes in between the sections of myelin sheath. And once again, this is all soft. This isn't petrified. This isn't rock. This is soft tissue. If you want to see more of these results, because they're really quite incredible, the research that he started under this, because he got this money from the university, is called the Dinosaur Soft Tissue Research Institute, DSTRI, so easy to remember. If you go there, he's got some videos, because he's got a really great video of these vein valves. He's taken a vein valve, using forceps and being very careful. He's put the vein valve over bacteria, and the membrane is so thin, you can see the bacteria swimming underneath the vein valve. So it's incredibly thin tissue with these little bacteria swimming around inside. And so it's got really cool stuff. And like I said, he's got a video of the soft cell flopping around for you, so you can see that. So anyway, if you go there, he's got these 3 peer-reviewed papers online, some videos from a presentation he gave at Lower Columbia College, and some other stuff as well. He also has a YouTube channel. If you go to look for the Mark H. Armitage YouTube channel, he's got the same videos and so forth there. So anyway, if you're interested in this at all, I really encourage you to see it. What's exciting about it is we've got, when I was at university, I was told definitively, we'll never see this kind of stuff. Because dinosaurs are 65 million years old and nothing can last, and soft tissue can't last that long. So the only thing we'll ever learn about dinosaurs are the things that could fossilize, and that's it. Well, we now know we can learn other stuff about dinosaurs because we now have access to their soft tissue, right? That's another level of detail that we didn't have before. And who's responsible for this? A creationist. Right now, because it's a creationist, it's being mostly ignored, unfortunately. But nevertheless, as time goes on, scientists will pick up on this. They have to. Because in the end, it's so ridiculously interesting, right? So really, really exciting stuff that he's doing. Now, going on to other studies of soft tissue in dinosaur, turns out it's incredibly common. And to give you an idea of how common it is, some paleontologists just went through a museum and looked for 7 really bad-looking bones. Poorly preserved, cruddy-looking bones. One of the investigators says this, quote, "They're very scrappy, individual broken bones. I can't even tell you what dinosaur they come from." Right? So they're not very well preserved. They're not very good. Nevertheless, in those scrappy, lousy dinosaur bones, they found not only red blood cells, but also proteins. Right? So this is a characteristic of red blood cells. They're called biconcave because they dip in on both sides. They look like somebody made a mistake with a donut. They didn't quite get the hole through, so you just got 2 caved-in sides. So that right, and the red being the red is actually added later. It's not really real from the microscope. Anyway, that shape is very, very specific to red blood cells. So they found red blood cells from these dinosaurs and proteins from these dinosaurs. in these scrappy, poorly preserved dinosaur bones. And basically they said, look, if they're in those bones, they're going to be in most bones. Because these are so lousy, right? Currently, if you want to believe in all these ages that evolutionists tell you about, the current record holder for soft tissue is this fossil. It's a fossil worm, and it's supposed to be 550 million years old. It's in Cambrian rock. The lower part of Cambrian rock is supposed to be 550 million years old. Nevertheless, the authors looked at it under an electron microscope, and they found soft tissue. Here's how you say that in the scientific world. Minerals have not replicated any part of the soft tissue, and the carbonaceous material of the wall is primary, preserving the original layering of the wall, its textures, and fabrics. Now, that's a lot of scientific lingo, but basically he's saying it hasn't been petrified, because things get petrified by minerals replacing the organic parts. So minerals have not replicated; it's not been petrified. The carbonaceous material, all the tissue that we are made of is based on carbon atoms, is primary. That means original. It hasn't been messed with in any way. And so we're preserving the original layering, the fabrics, and everything of the wall. So, if you want to believe the timetable that evolutionists give us for the Earth, you have to believe that there is a way for soft tissue to hang around for 550 million years without decaying away or getting petrified. Now, I have no way of understanding that from a chemical perspective. Like I said, we understand these molecules pretty well as far as we know. And most of these molecules would have decayed into their individual atoms, or at least into tiny, tiny sections of the molecule, in like 30,000 years. This is lasting way beyond what anybody can understand from a chemical standpoint. It's like Dr. Burke was talking about how much faith it takes. It takes a lot of faith to believe that soft tissue can hang around for 550 million years. But that's what you gotta believe. And right now, it's not getting much play in the real world. Mark Armitage got fired because some students were finding out about it. But as time goes on, more of this is going to be discovered. And what's now just mostly confined to a few scientists is going to become very, very popularly known. And it'll just be really interesting what people are willing to believe in order to preserve their original ideas. Remember, Mary Schweitzer, the paleontologist who started this, the first soft tissue discovery, she's still convinced that Tyrannosaurus rex fossil is 65 million years old. As a matter of fact, she's trying to publish a couple of papers trying to explain maybe how soft tissue might be preserved for that long. She has not been successful so far. But that's her current work. Her current work is trying to figure out a way that all of the chemistry we know is wrong, and that soft tissue can somehow hang around. So, to some extent, this gives you an idea of what you're up against when you try and talk to evolutionists. I try and talk to evolutionists all the time. And so a few of them are open-minded, but most of them are willing to believe crazy things just to keep the world view the way they want it to be. Now, this is really cool stuff, and I think the soft tissue is stuff that everybody can understand and really likes. I find this to be much more convincing, but it's much less tangible for most people. So I consider this to be much, much more convincing that those dinosaur bones are not millions of years old. There are significant amounts of carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. And that might be, you might not know why that's surprising. To a nuclear chemist, that's ridiculously surprising, if the bones are 65 million years old. Here's why. Carbon-14 is radioactive. So we've got a lot of carbon in our bodies, because all the molecules make up, almost all molecules that are in our bodies are made up of carbon. Carbon has a couple of stable versions, carbon-12 and carbon-13, and they make up the vast majority of carbon that's in the universe. But some carbon is unstable. It's carbon called carbon-14, and over time, it changes. It's kind of like a teenage girl. I raised a teenage girl. The whole time she was a teenager, she didn't like herself. She wanted to be somebody else. She wanted to be anybody but herself. Carbon-14 is like that. It wants to be anything but carbon-14. So eventually, it shoots out a bit of its nucleus and becomes nitrogen-14 instead. and is now very high. So it turns from carbon-14 into nitrogen-14. Now, nitrogen is a gas. So if you had carbon-14 and you were really patient, you could look at a lump of carbon-14, which is a black solid, and over time it would just seem to disappear because it would turn into this gas and float away. Right? Now, it takes a while. No matter how much of you have, half of it goes away in 5,700 years. So I know this talk may sound like that. But if you had a lump of carbon-14 in your hand and you waited 5,700 years, suppose you had 100 grams of it in your hand, after 5,700 years, you'd have 50 grams. Now what's really weird is you wait another 5,700 years, you don't have 0 grams, you now have 25 grams. Every 5,700 years, whatever amount you have cuts itself in half. And that's why it's called the half-life, because it's the time it takes for half of it to go away. Now, as radioactive isotopes go, this is actually fairly fast. There are some really, really fast decayers out there. But for most common radioactive isotopes, this is actually a fairly short half-life. And generally speaking, if you cut something in half enough, even though it's still there all the time, it eventually gets so low you can't detect it. So even if I had a ton of carbon-14 and I cut it in half 10 times, in the end I'd have so little carbon-14 I really couldn't measure it. So generally speaking, we say that any radioactive isotope becomes undetectable after about 10 half-lives. So, in the case of carbon-14, after about 60,000 years, we shouldn't be able to detect any of it. That's just the way radioactive isotopes work. And sure enough, carbon-14 dating is a very common method of dating things in the scientific literature. And if something cannot return a carbon-14 date, it is listed as greater than 60,000 years old. Because it's thought, okay, we can't get a carbon-14 date on it because it's been around for more than 60,000 years, and so the carbon-14 is decayed to the point where it's not detectable. So, no one ever thought, just like up until Mary Schweitzer, no one ever thought to look for soft tissue in a dinosaur bone. No one ever thought, except for creationists, no one ever thought to look for carbon-14 in a dinosaur bone. 65 million years old, that's long more than 60,000 years old, so there should be no carbon-14 in it. When creationists tried to convince evolution, you should really check for carbon-14. No, it's not going to be there. It's silly. Why would we do that? Well, carbon-14 dating is kind of expensive. You know, most churches don't have a particle accelerator, and you need a particle accelerator to do carbon-14 dating. So basically what you generally do is you gather up enough money, you send a sample to a professional lab that does it for a living. And you pay that lab to give you a carbon-14 dating. So for a long time, creationists couldn't do it because they couldn't find a dinosaur sample that anybody was willing to give them. And they didn't have enough money. But over time, creation science got a little more interesting, a little more popular. So eventually, we had some really serious paleontologists who were creationists go out and start finding dinosaur bones. This is a Tyrannosaurus rex femur. But no, sorry, this is a Triceratops femur. It's a femur, it's a Triceratops. And they want to test, and they're in the process of gathering a sample that they're going to test. Now, you don't gather the sample from the outside of the bone because there's all sorts of contaminants there, right? What you got to do is you got to saw inside the bone. A lot of paleontologists just hate that because once again, this is like crashing and being, smashing a mean vase to see what's inside, right? But nevertheless, he's hacks on through that thing, and there are protocols. There's an established way you do this. It's set out in scientific literature. So they're going to extract a sample from inside that femur, and then they're going to process it the way it's supposed to be processed. Send it to a professional lab. Pay the professional lab is going to give them the result. How much carbon-14 is in there? Now, if this really were 65 million years old, the answer should be 0. But in fact, that's not the case. Every dinosaur bone that's been tested this way has carbon-14. Every one has some carbon-14. So for example, this is an Acrocanthosaurus, supposed to be 100 million years old. It has enough carbon-14 in it that if you believe carbon-14 dating, it says it's somewhere between 23,000 and 30,000 years old. Now, I don't believe those dates either. But if carbon-14 dating worked, and these fossils really are 65 million years old, the answer should be, I can't get a date. The fact that they can get a date at all says either carbon-14 dating is wrong, these bones aren't 65 million years old, or, might prefer, both. Right? But at least one of those has to be true. Right? And if this were just one bone, it wouldn't be a big deal. But you see this all over the place. There's a triceratops. This was the femur that was being sawed apart. 24,000 to 39,000 years old. Now, I don't think it's really that old, but it shows there's something wrong here. Because in the end, that shouldn't be there at all. So far, what I've seen in the literature, creationist literature, says there have been 8 dinosaur fossils tested this way. All of them give dates of 39,000 years old or younger. None of them tested the way they should test if they're 65 years old. None of them. So, how do evolutionists respond to this? There's only 8 samples because the lab that the creationists were paying decided to refuse any more samples they were sent. Now remember, this lab makes its living by doing carbon-14 dating. Right? They are purposely hurting their bottom line because they don't like what the results are saying. Here's what the part of the email from this lab. CAIS, that's the abbreviation of the lab. The scientists at CAIS are dismayed by the claims that you and your team have made with respect to the age of the Earth and the validity of biological evolution. Consequently, we are no longer able to provide radiocarbon services in support of your anti-scientific agenda. Now let me ask you something. If I've got one person who wants to do a scientific test on a sample, and I got one person who refuses, who's being anti-scientific? Right? The scientists at the lab are the ones being unscientific. Right. Because look, let's suppose you want to believe this. Okay, let's suppose, and I talk to a lot of people, I have colleagues who want to believe this, who want to believe it's 65 million years old. I ask them, don't you want to know why there's carbon-14 in there? I mean, if they are 65 million years old, you've got to explain why it's in there. You've either got to say how it gets in there, how it's made while it's in there, I don't know. But if you want to believe this is 65 million years old, you've at least got to figure out why there's carbon-14. How do you do that? By doing lots of tests and trying to find out if there's any pattern you can find and so forth. But you don't learn by not doing tests. And yet that's exactly what these guys are doing. Really, really crazy. Now, Pastor White, Richard talked about debates. I did a debate with Dr. Robert Martin a couple of times here at the Creation Evidence Expo, and I brought this up in one of the debates. And he said, oh, it's just contamination, right? It's just contamination. What was really funny was during the question and answer session later on, somebody said, well, how accurate is radioactive dating? And Dr. Martin said, oh, it's very accurate. Carbon-14 dating, for example, is accurate to within a couple hundred years. And I said, oh, except for dinosaur bones, right? Then it's not accurate at all. Right? But anyway, that was his argument. Oh, there's really some sort of contamination in there. Well, that's certainly possible. It could be carbon-14 that's contamination. But if that's the case, then any carbon-14 date that's 24,000 years, which is the youngest date we found in the dinosaur bones so far, or older, now this gets thrown into question. Because all of those data be from contamination as well. How is it that we know the 65 million year old bone is a result of contamination, but this thing that you think is really 24,000 years old, how do we know that's not contamination as well? When you start throwing some away, you got to start throwing them all away. There are thousands of carbon-14 dates like this, right? Now, I do believe they're probably not wrong. But the point is, if you're going to throw away the dinosaur dates, you got to throw these away as well. Also, the whole process, like I said, there's this protocol you have to follow while you're extracting the sample. There's a protocol you have to do while packaging the sample to send to the lab. And then there's a protocol the lab does once it gets the sample. And these are all designed specifically to get rid of the contamination, or at least make it not all that important. So in the end, you're calling into question the entire process to some extent. But here's to me the big one. In order to actually do this, they looked at the carbon-14 in the rock surrounding the fossil. Now, if this is contamination, it had to come from the surroundings, right? So where should there be more carbon-14? It should be in the surroundings where it's going into the fossil. In fact, there's less carbon-14 in the surroundings than there is in the fossil. If anything, the fossil is leaking carbon-14 to the surroundings. The surroundings isn't leaking carbon-14 into the fossil. So in the end, it's hard to believe it's contamination. But at least if you think it is, you better do enough tests to try and figure out how it's being contaminated. And nobody wants to do the tests anymore because they don't agree with the evolutionary view. Now, what I see here are two completely independent lines of evidence that these fossils are not millions of years old. I've got soft tissue which by every possible chemical analysis can't last for millions of years. And yet it's very, very common in dinosaurs. And I've got carbon-14, which should be undetectable after 60,000 years. It's in lots of dinosaur bones as well. These are two completely different processes. The carbon-14 comes from a different source than the soft tissue and all that. So in the end, you got two completely independent lines of evidence that say these fossils are not millions of years old. Now, of course, if you're a creationist, you think these fossils are probably only order of 4,500 years old. And 4,500 years, it's easy to understand how carbon-14 can hang around that long. That's easy. Soft tissue is a little more difficult to understand than carbon-14, but surely 4,500 years of soft tissue is easier to understand than 65 billion, right? So either way, the idea that these fossils are only 4,500 years old rather than 65 billion years old, much more reasonable based on the data. Okay, I think we're going to have questions all as a team, right? Yeah. So, hope you enjoyed that.
It's out there. Only one Dr. J. He's awesome. Amen. I'd like to, before we have John Oliveira come give us another number, if you have not turned in a card for a registration card, please turn them in. We're going to have a drawing after Q&A, and I know we got more people than the cards we have. So fill out a card, turn it in. You can win a nice prize leaving the expo. Amen? There was something else I was going to say. I had a senior moment. If I remember it, I'll call you guys early in the morning and remind you, tell you what I had on my mind. All right, Mr. John Oliveira is going to come and give us a song, and then right after that, we're going to have Q&A with all of our presenters tonight for at least 20, 30 minutes of Q&A, okay? So let's get ready. Let's give Mr. John Oliveira a great hand as he comes.
Well, I don't know that many of you were at the rally, but I got to attend that. And how many of you are very, very distraught over the violence and craziness that we've seen in our nation? You know, I used to run a program called Young Champions, and part of that was really, really centered around how to actually respect people. And it didn't matter color, race, or creed. You know, if you don't have respect for others, then you know you can't respect yourself. And so this song came to me after that rally, and it really talks about, you know, how God comes into your life and changes who you used to be. A lot of us, before we came to know the Lord, we were something else. And what I saw on TV, and like we've all seen on TV, you know, that's just a result of no Jesus. And we definitely need Him. Amen. From the tomb I can see mist the lightning and thunder. A tiny ship
about to go under, and I laughed as they tried to make what waters divorce. Something happened that I'll never forget, and I still don't quite understand how a man in the boat could keep them afloat with just the wave of his hand. He calmed the storm on the sea that was raging. Still the tempest that nature was waging against this battered form. And there came a peace, angry winds were silent. Such a calm when I once was so violent. I'll never forget the man who calmed the storm. Many times they had tried, but no one could tame me. Even chains could never contain me. I run to the cold, dark tomb and dwell there alone. Till the man on the boat from the sea came ashore. On the storm, on the sea, at his feet I would fall, 'cause I knew he could calm the storm that was raging in me. He calmed the storm in my heart that was raging. Still the tempest that Satan was raging against this battered form. And there came a peace, angry voices were silent. Such a calm man that once was so violent. I'll never forget the man who calmed the storm. Well, I wanted to go and live by his side, 'cause there's no place I'd rather be. But until that day, he wants me to stay and tell what he's done for me. He calmed the storm in my heart that was raging. Still the tempest of Satan was raging against this battered form. And there came a peace, angry voices were silent. Such a calm man that once was so violent. I'll never forget the man who calmed the storm. I'll never forget the man who calmed the storm. He'll calm the storm.
All right, gentlemen, come on down. That's already.
Oh, no, I have a question.
You got a
My
question?
turn to ask a question.
You're gonna ask a question, and you want the ones up here.
What these guys ain't like.
All right. What's right, Malone? I'm sorry. I'm thinking you spoke tonight.
No.
I'm getting old, man. Before we get started with the Q&A, we certainly thank God for all of the lectures we have received on this evening as we did last night. I just remembered what I was going to say. Tomorrow, if you're in town, looking for a church to worship in, join us at Zion Unity tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We're going to have free messages. We've got Pastor John Burnside will be speaking tomorrow. And my dear brother, our state director from Wisconsin, Pastor Curtis McMiller will stand. He's our state director from Wisconsin. He's going to speak tomorrow night. So if you're in town, come on over, and when you get done, we're going to have our annual Italian feast. Our chef is working on it as we speak. And then secondly, if this ministry has been a blessing to you, we are receiving special gifts, financial gifts. We take checks, cash, or credit cards. So if you want to be a blessing to the ministry, we'll receive it. Amen? You give, and we shall receive. Okay, Q&A time. We're going to take about 20 minutes or so and get some questions. All right, Bruce Malone has the first question. Bruce, and then we'll get Malone. All right, well.
Hello. Here, Dr. Professor Bergman. Stephen Hawking is considered godlike almost by many. True.
Yeah, one of the most eminent astrophysicists in the world, cosmologist.
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
Thought experiment, Godkin experiments, though, right? Thought experiments.
He's done some real experiments too. He's a theoretical physicist, but he's done some.
Okay, well, would you just, on the personal side, in a few sentences, outline how he treated his first wife?
Oh yeah, his first wife wrote a long book, very detailed. He really treated her very, very poorly. And she details, she had a hard time with the arrogance of these eminent scientists that he used to hang around with. And she described him as a skeleton like you see in Auschwitz. A lot of people assume they divorced because she had a hard time with him. She divorced him because he had an affair with his nurse. Hard to believe, skeleton, but anyways, yeah, she did a really good job. She has a doctorate in, I think, French literature, something like that, but she did a good job. I read from cover to cover her book about, like, a lot of insight into high-level, high-energy physics, etc. So I thought it was she had a lot of insight. Very well done, even though she doesn't have a degree in psychology, but yeah, it was really, you get a chance, I forget the title, but just look under, what's his wife's name? Hawking's wife, Jane Hawking. Look under Jane Hawking, you'll see her book. Really a good read. I have pages now. Read it in a few days. So it's extremely well.
Is she remarried now?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. They were married for 20-some years.
If you watch The Big Bang Theory, it said that Sheldon's treatment of Amy early on was modeled after Hawking's treatment of his wife. The idea that Sheldon was saying her PhD's only in biology. She's not that smart. I guess that was very common for Hawking to say and introduce his wife as, well, she's only got a PhD in literature.
The Pope invited Hawkins to visit him, and Jane thought that was quite an honor. Of course it is. And Stephen just had nothing but negative about him and the church and all these idiots and stupid. And she goes into detail, and she just thought, this needs to be somewhat respectable. I mean, you invited them. I've never had it for audience for the Pope. I mean, if you were, I would like to know. I mean, that's really quite an honor. And he just treated the Pope very, very well. I'm not Catholic, but still, he deserves some respect for the office and for what he's done.
Okay, question for each of you. If you just give me some brief thoughts. Jerry specifically, and I know you have kind of referred to the things that are creating incredible bias and blindness of the world around us, the academic world, is A, indoctrination throughout their education to the point they're blind to any other viewpoint, and second, enormous tangible peer pressure to not give in. Those are huge. I'm going to dwell more into them tomorrow. 95% of students, somewhere around that number, are going to go through our education system in this country. And every generation then becomes more blind and more biased. And we're seeing it. What is going to turn it around? What can turn it around?
I think with colleges, it's already being turned around because people are really getting fed up as to what type of people the colleges are producing. These demonstrators who are burning buildings and shooting policemen and so on, one survey found that most of them are young, highly educated, college, white women.
So the consequences of the belief system will in and of itself be what turns it around.
And the anger they express, swear they can't say a sentence without any F word, a few other choice words.
Well, okay, other thoughts. I just want a thought or two from each of you. Because this is what we should be thinking about. I'm kind of an engineer thinking of how do we fix it? That's what engineers do. How do we fix the problem? And ultimately, God is going to have to be involved, but specifically,
Daniel says he has no thoughts on this.
specific practical ideas. Thank you.
So, if you have any thoughts, please pipe up. I tend to be a little more optimistic. I really do. I mean, if you look at the history of science, is people clinging to a theory until it's been totally disproven 1,000 different ways.
It has.
Right. Well, no, but think about it. You know, what was it? Francisco Redi was the first one to do an experiment in the 1600s to show that life doesn't spontaneously arise from dead things.
Took it to the
arise from dead things. However, and that experiment was conclusive. But the ones who wanted to continue to believe in spontaneous generation said, well, okay, yeah, it doesn't work that way. It works at the cellular level. We don't really understand that yet. We'll see it at the cellular level. So then somebody else comes along and says, no, it doesn't work at the cellular level either. I can't remember his name. And they said, oh, it works at the molecular level, right? So they kept putting it off, and it really wasn't until Pasteur, which was 200 years later, right? My favorite example is there's this guy, Dan Schlechtman, who ended up winning the Nobel Prize over this, but he discovered crystals which science said definitively couldn't exist. He had pictures of those crystals that he made, and scientists still said, no, not possible, it doesn't exist. The greatest scientist of the time, or the greatest chemist of the time, Lance Pauling, said there's no such thing as these, what they call quasi-crystals, but there are quasi-scientists like Dan Schlechtman. The head of his lab asked Dan Schlechtman to resign because he was embarrassing the lab. He had pictures, and it still took about 20 years.
And that wasn't a philosophical basis of belief system.
No. Well, but it was, and all that was, you know, there was a very successful theory of crystallization that said this process was impossible. And the theory worked for a lot of different things, but it obviously was wrong.
So, and I want to get to someone else, but your basis is the truth will ultimately get through if we just keep promoting it.
Yeah, science is self-correcting, and it will just take time. Okay. It really does. And it took, 200 years to spontaneous generation. It's going to take some time, especially, like you said, this idea has some philosophical consequences as well. That makes it worse. But I think look at what's happened just over the last since 1995 or something like that. Prior to 95, you could definitively say in the peer-reviewed secular scientific theory literature, there was never a single paper questioning Darwinism. Since that Proceedings of the Biological Society paper that caused all that controversy in the late 90s, there have been hundreds. Right? So there's progress already. But science works really slow. Really slow.
Thank you.
One comment here. What's that really morbid saying, science progresses one death at a time?
Yes. So, when the old people die and the younger people come in and start changing.
Well, I appreciate that. The hope is the young people.
The young people.
We've got to keep getting the truth in front of them. And that's part of what I'll be talking about tomorrow night, but I wanted your thoughts. Thank you.
Let me add one thing. The problem, I think, is less in science is brought up correctly than other areas. They've done studies of political affiliation of professors. They find that like 98%, almost every professor at almost every university are either Democrats, socialists, or communists, or Marxists. Sorry, I don't use the word communist anymore. They're Marxists. And Republicans are rare on college campuses. And there are many documentation studies that show why this is true. It started with the radical 60s. Those people who are burning down the campuses now are the deans and the presidents. And they are basically hiring pretty clearly only, especially in political science and sociology. So now, I have to admit, the science itself, physics and chemistry, it's a lot more objective, it's less of a problem. But it's sure a problem in universities as a whole. And that's what I think is occurred. It's already hurt many of the universities because people see what kind of people are coming out.
Okay.
Let me say this. One thing for sure, you keep putting the truth out there, it's going to knock down the lie. And I see clearly that we're winning the war. Creation is defeating evolution. It's a matter of time. We're going to bury it. Amen.
We won the war.
We're on the winning side. The world don't know it yet. They will. All right, where's the microphone? Oh, wait, we've got John Oliveira's question.
So I wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Bruce said, but more so on, I think, what you mentioned earlier, Dr. Bergman, I believe. I have at least 2 young adults. My wife is 29, and we have 3 children, and both of them grew up in the church that we attend now. They went to secular schools for university, but they went through Christian school. So we know their parents, we know what they were taught, and just to hear what's posted on Facebook, and this is in light of what we're all dealing with right now, but it's almost like what we're dealing with right now truly has been revealing what's in people's hearts. It's so interesting, I find how much pressure what we as a country have gone through, it really causes it to come to the surface. Anyway, my point that I'm trying to make is, they have literally, I don't want to say they've lost their faith, but that's what I believe. I mean, they have, the indoctrination that Bruce just mentioned was so overwhelming in their university life that it's in their adulthood now. And my question really was, what do we do as the church? Not only obviously our charge is to give the Great Commission, but what do we do for our church and our own families? Like, now I'm getting a little closer to home now. Because these are for my wife, these are her colleagues, almost in a way, her friends. And that was a very big burden in my heart when I heard you guys speak to them.
All right, Brother Kelly next.
No, he had a question.
I'm sorry.
What we need is more of these creation expos done in the church. All 3 of us, at least they did a good job.
All 3 of us did.
And they need to be in the churches. This presentation on the dinosaur, that was excellent, really well done. And I would assume most everybody can follow that pretty easily. That needs to be in churches, but ministers have the idea, you can tell me if I'm wrong, they have the idea you preach Christ in every sermon. And that's good, but in essence, preaching, looking at science, is preaching, this is Christ up here. This is the design that Christ put in bones. He's telling us something from physical evidence we see. And this is Christ's message in the bones. And that's what Hebrews 1:20 says. The heavens declare the glory of God. So study the heavens and study the earth and study the dinosaur bones and study everything around us, and that will help people understand indeed there is a God, He's there, He's doing something, He's showed us the evidence by science.
Well, before Jay speaks, as a pastor, I know this is important, this is foundational. Psalms 11:3 says that the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? And pastors are missing it because they I don't know where their minds are at, but people are 40 hours a week, they're brainwashed in schools. And they have a few hours a week, and they think, well, just preach the gospel. You got to give people a foundation to build on. That's what creation is. That's why they want to try to get rid of Genesis, because there's too much truth, too much foundation there. So I'm not one of these pastors that believe, I know this is important. I tell my people all the time, we need to attend this. We got children, grandchildren that need to be taught correctly. So Jay.
Well, and just in addition to what he said, I agree, you got to get this teaching out there. But also the Lutherans did a wonderful study over the course of like 30 years. And they started with their junior high school kids and followed them all the way through young adulthood. And they said there was only one factor they could find that gave a decent prediction of whether or not they'd stay in the faith. And that was, when they were young, were they comfortable expressing doubts about their faith? If they were comfortable expressing doubts about their faith when they were young, they were more likely to be still in the faith when they were older. And so that goes along with him. You know, a lot of pastors and even parents don't want to touch this stuff because it makes them doubt their faith. You should encourage this. They should be comfortable telling the pastor, I don't understand this. How could this be? And then you should model to them the way a Christian studies to show himself approved unto God, to find out these answers.
I want to add to that with, you remember in my talk, I had that target, you in the center, not being selfish, but you need to focus on your life. Second, your family. The parents need to step up. It's a parental thing. Controversial, but homeschool. very powerful. I was so educated all my life. I went to college, got my graduate degree and everything else. So another thing with that, especially when you go to college, accountability. Do they have a church family? Do they have a group of people they can be with every Sunday? And if you can keep your child at home through college, more power to you, because that's when we're better. That gives them that your parental accountability. And exactly what Jay said is, be open to doubts. That's awesome. Has anybody heard of Josh McDowell's response to his son Sean when Sean doubted his faith? Did anybody ever hear that story? One time, Josh and Sean, just his son, were out drinking a cup of coffee someplace. I don't know what it was. And Josh was reading the newspaper. And Sean was getting kind of nervous. He's like, Dad, he's like 18 at this time, just finished high school. Dad, I really doubt if Christianity is true. I'm just wondering if this is not even true. This is Josh McDowell, you know, like the top apologist that everybody knows about, you know. Evidence that demands a verdict, you know. And Sean, his son, was like, I doubt this stuff. I'm skeptical. I'm thinking that might not be true. What was Josh's response? That's great, son. And then he just kept reading his paper. And Sean's like, Dad, you didn't hear what I just said. And his dad's like, yeah, I heard what you said. He's like, that's great. I know this is if you really want the truth, you will seek out the truth. With all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. No matter what you come to, I will still love you. But whatever you do, don't forget what your mom and what I taught you growing up. Now, Sean has picking up where his dad's upper years now, but he's still speaking, still writing, but Sean is following right behind him. So he allowed him to doubt, allowed him to question, and he helped him with answers.
And before Brother Carl speaks, that's why we're losing people, because we're not giving them answers to the reason for the hope that lies within them. And our core scripture here for this ministry is 1 Peter 3:15, that you might have reasons. We want to give you answers. And if our presenters don't give you answers, then we'll get on them. But their job is to give us answers for the faith that lies within us. Amen? All right, Brother Carl, Pastor Carl.
Praise the Lord. I want to thank all of you, Bruce, Dr. J, Dr. Bergman, David, all of you, for your intellect, your faith, and the willingness to stand before an audience and proclaim what you believe. I've heard each of you speak about what was said and that the truth had to be mandated that they were spoken to. Why is not there a mandate, a requirement, a law, a rule, a regulation, or some requirement that truth with a definition of truth is the mark that you shoot for? To my knowledge, there is no requirement for truth to be a component of our educational system. If we were truly going to allow a lie to be taught to our children in order for them to pass a test and to that they memorized information that doubts the existence of a divine deity, why can't we require that there be evidence, not just peer review, physical evidence, that something is what it says it is? Why do I always hear sidestepping? Why is there no requirement that the truth of the gospel be measured against the lie of evolution and the truth be mandated by the definition of truth? That this is a lie or this is true. I'd like for each of you to respond on that, you two especially. Praise the Lord. You chicken.
I'd say that the courts have ruled very clearly that anything supporting Christianity specifically cannot be taught because that's a violation of the separation of church and state. Therefore, when you critique evolution, the courts have clearly ruled, you critique evolution, that is indirectly teaching religion, Christianity, and therefore you are not allowed to critique. Court case made this very clear. You're not allowed to critique evolution. that is being taught is fact, and any information against that would be violation of separation of church and state. Now that's really stressed, but that's what they wrote. I'm not a church, you're not a church. And so, words are not a church.
There's nothing written that states that.
The court decisions made that clear, yeah. I have hundreds of court decisions that made that very clear, consistently, except the Supreme Court, ironically.
Yeah, but I think that's the core issue here. You know, your definition of truth is very different from the state's definition of truth. I mean, and that's, you know, when Pilate tried Jesus, what was one of the questions he said? What is truth? Right? We're in this postmodern nonsense that Hamlet talked about when he said he was reading words that have no meaning. Because in postmodernism, there is no truth. It's just what you believe it means is your truth, and what I believe it means is my truth. And so you're never, ever going to get the state to agree on a single definition of truth.
It's a very quick thought. I mentioned before Star Parker that both at Plantation, but she made a really good point saying that a lot of our educational system today is focused on values, not virtues. And truth is a virtuous thing, and values are not mere solid. I value diversity. Well, no, let's talk about virtue. Doing right and stuff like that. I think it's humility over time.
Yeah, I use this example because I like to keep things simple. And I think people appreciate that, whether they're a PhD or a young child. Most of these issues are either-or answers. Either the universe and the earth are billions of years old, or they were recently created. Either life comes together by itself without any interaction, chemicals come alive, or they haven't. Either the universe, time, matter, energy, space made itself, or that horrible box. And I say the box either made itself, or somehow somebody made the box. And people get it. They get that. But by law, we as a nation have allowed a system to develop where we have said the laws of the land over and over again, from the Supreme Court on down, have said there has to be a separation of church and state. The state runs the school system. Anything dealing with God as creator has to be left out. So they're only allowed to show and promote evidence that supports that one option. And they'll be sued if they even cast doubt upon it. Your books are full of that. Because by logic, if there is doubt the box made itself, the only option left is that something outside the box made the box. So you're promoting that. You understand what's going on? It's locked into a generational system. I think the only way around it is for a whole other generation, and someone referred to this, to rise up and stop putting up with this nonsense and overturn those kind of decisions. Ultimately, that's what's going to have to happen. Tomorrow night, I'm really going to start to dwell into these things that are causing a blindness. The whole Romans 1, seeking to be wise, they literally become foolish in their thinking. Foolishness meaning in their heart they say there is no God. That's the way they act, that's the way they think. They become blinded to the possibility. And I think it's, again, the truth that will ultimately set them free from that blindness. And the church's job has always been to shine the light of truth. But we've got to wake up the church. There's so few that come to these conferences, and I don't have a solution to that.
I've been 15 years trying to figure that out. I want to say this. Hold my back, I have to sit down. But they say there's a separation of church and state. And how is it the state can tell me to shut my doors and keep them closed? You can't play the ball game both ways.
It's not the state.
It's not on the playing field. The
Yeah.
state has exceeded its
This foolishness to say separation of church and state, leave us alone. We can't come in the schools and teach the truth of creation. And they tell me to keep my doors there. I'm loony. Like I said Friday, the governor and the mayor, they got some serious issues. I'm keeping my doors open. People, we need the church. People are committing suicide left and right because they don't have no hope. And I'm going to shut my door. I'm not doing it. and they've had the nerve to say the church is non-essential, but yet the whorehouses are essential, and liquor stores are essential, and the gambling casinos are essential. They are just as loony can be, and we're non-essential. That's what the state says. Well, make it small, but we got to get out of here, Carl.
Okay, on the subject of separation of church and state, how can they allow a statement that was made to a person explaining how the church should be the moral conscience of the government and the government should not have control of the church? How can that be twisted in our society with the so-called intelligence that we have and turned into the state has to be protected from the church?
Because governments are run by fallen people, intellectually, morally, spiritually fallen. Don't expect logic.
That's exactly right. We're gonna take one more question tonight, and tomorrow night we'll take more questions. But we want to get you out of here and so you can get ready for church tomorrow. So.
Okay, I don't know if I can express this in the way that I want to because I'm so upset right now. But with what you said, Bruce, and I know we've talked about this before, I have two children in college. Both grew up in the church. Both have attended this program several years and have heard at least Bruce and Dr. Weil speak, and both are questioning. Okay? They go to a high school that won't tell me what they're indoctrinating them with, but anyway, I believe that the families, not just the church needs to get the word out there. We need to know what we believe and be able to answer questions or allow our children to question. But moms need to step up. I wasn't able to homeschool my children. I never even considered it because, I was in the corporate world and whatever. And there's a lot of people that aren't capable of homeschooling. And you have to have light in the public school as well. So how do we get people to rise up and do something? I mean, I'm so revved up right now, but tomorrow I'll be tired again, and I don't know how to get other people rallying. I attended a school board meeting where I was one of 3 people who was not there for the diversity language they want to put into their school thing. Oh my gosh. I did. And I was actually interviewed by the television station because they said, you don't seem to have the same attitude as the rest of them. But they barred the door. No one could get in unless they forced themselves in. I forced myself in so I could say to the school board, I do not want you to teach my child that something that is counter to physical biology. And I'm not allowed to know that they're being taught that. Yeah. And it's true. And this is one of the top schools in the state. And anyway,
just real quick, and I'm going to get in my talk tomorrow night. But I think the best preparation, in addition to allowing your kids to question and keep encouraging them, look for the truth, look for the truth, look for the truth, is to help them understand why their teachers, whom they respect, the textbooks that are presented as experts, the culture around us, why they believe what they believe, and why they're wrong. Then they're way less likely to be sucked into it when they hear all these excuses that they don't have an answer to. They at least understand why it's being promoted, why they're thinking that way, especially in the area of natural processes versus God. Why are they blind to it? Why are they leaving it out? And I think that'll go a long way toward preparing at least the people we know that are around us. We have to have that conversation.
Well, we want to thank God for.
I want to ask that one more thing.
All right, Dr. J.
If you decide to rely on the state, you are at the mercy of the state. So if you're sending your child to public school, either you got to change the public schools, which is really hard, or get them the heck out.
And if you can't do that, and there's some parents that just can't.
No, I agree.
You've got to do everything you can to prepare them. And there's so many majority of parents who don't. They don't do hardly anything. And I think having them in church for the first 18 years is going to make a difference. So the church isn't teaching them why the world is thinking in a completely backwards way.
I'd like to say something. You know, I've never been to this meeting before, but I really believe everything you people are talking about. But you know, I was in Florida last winter, and the governor of Florida said church was essential. And you know, in Polk County, it was only 7 churches that would have church service. Now tell me that the church is what's letting this country down.
Well, I agree. I'm 100% with you on that, man. And welcome to the creation of this expo. I'm glad you're here.
If
we're running out of time.
Because if my people call me by my name, will not pray, repent, and turn from their wicked ways, the nation will not be changed. So it starts with the church, as what you just pointed out. Thank you.
Amen. That was Sister Perrin's favorite scripture, Ellen Perrin. All right, we're going to get you guys out of here. I want to make this announcement. We got a set of Warren Wiersbe's commentaries on the table there. And here's the challenge to the pastors. Whoever brings 10 or more people tomorrow to the expo, the final night for this year, will be in a drawing for that set of commentaries from Warren Wiersbe. Now, if you don't bring 10 or more, you don't get in the drawing for that. Okay? So find 10 people, bring them here tomorrow, and you'll qualify for this drawing. Okay? All right, our new secretary for the creation of this expo, who replaced Sister Ellen Perrin, Sister Pamela Early will come now so y'all can meet the new secretary and give her a hand as she's taking on some big shoes. She's going to do our drawing tonight, so you know I ain't cheap, okay? All right, the first gift from Dr. Willie Dye, hat, believers, Bible believers, and the winner is
Ellie Smith.
Come on, Ellie. Give that kid. You can wear it yourself. It doesn't matter. All right, the next gift is a beautiful cross with Jesus on it, and the winner is
Doris Tudor.
Doris.
Doris?
She's your friend, the one that was sitting right there.
Is she left?
No.
She's still here.
All right, okay, let's give it to her and tell her she won. All right, we got a gift from the 7 Baskets, DVD, and other materials, and the winner is
Anna Burnside.
There's your gift over at Doris. Amen. Thanks for coming to the expo. You always win when you come. Be a part of it. All right.
Anna Burnside.
Anna, is she still here? Well, let's draw another one. I don't know why you leave and miss out on gifts.
John Oliver.
All right, John, come on up, man. You got a combination package from 7 Baskets at this, praise God. All right, one of Dr. Bergman's books, and have him sign it for you. Science is the doorway to the Creator, and the winner is?
I'll let you read that one.
Abigail Fogel. Every year, the Fogel family has won something. Every year. That shows for their faithfulness how God blesses them. All right, next one is going to be why creation evidence is important, scientific evidence supporting younger. Dr. Mark Waldo, who used to be part of our team, and it's a DVD, and the winner is?
Michael Allen.
Michael, come on, Michael. And Michael is another brother that's been with us, I think, have you been with us on every single expo?
I can't remember what year
Downtown, that's my first start.
Well, you've been with us ever since 2006. If you were downtown, that was, you talk about, you're talking about at Market Square, I mean, not Market Square, City County, I mean, Convention Center?
No.
Oh, you're talking about 2820 North Meridian? Okay, he's been with us a long time. Thank you, Mike. And he wins every year too. All right. The next one is a $250 gift certificate from Anthony Mina towards a new suit, and the winner is. Yeah, come on, Ron. Well, this is new suit. Come on, Ron.
Ron and Bobo.
This is Mike Fogel night, and so why not? That's his family. Amen. Now, you have to come to Indianapolis to get that done. So you make a special trip. If y'all come to Indianapolis, let me know. I'll take you to lunch, okay? All right. Next one is one of those easy, what do you call it? E-book readers or covers, and the winner is?
Dale Martin.
Dale, come on down, Dale. Yeah. Praise God. Now, one of Bruce Malone's books, have him sign it. Have you considered evidence beyond reasonable doubt? And the winner is?
Hannah Thomas.
Hannah Thomas, come on, man. Hannah, are you still here?
That's what it is. Oh, no. That's Imes. That's Hannah Imes. I'm sorry. Eames.
Hannah? Is Hannah here?
Well, then how did
Well, she got slipped in. Maybe what should have been one of your cards, but. And the winner will be
Keith Martin.
Keith Martin. All right, Keith, where you at? All right. We'll sign that for you, okay? Now we got another book from Dr. Bergman. Darwinism is a doorway to atheism. That was our lecture tonight, and the winner is?
Sam Marlowe.
Sam, come on down, Sam. Okay, another Bible believer's hat from Dr. Willie Dye, and the winner is?
Wes Smith.
Come on, Wes. Now you can wear it proudly, man. And this time, we're not going to care. You can win every night. We're not restricting how many times you can win. All right? Another book from Bruce Malone. Have you considered evidence beyond reasonable doubt? And the winner is?
David Eames.
David Eames. Come on, David. There you go. Have Bruce sign that for you. Next one is Darwinian eugenics and the Holocaust. Dr. Jerry Bergman, and the winner is?
Amber Marlowe.
Amber. Come on, Amber. And she's married now. This is one of the oldest children, the oldest one. Amen. They're all cleaning the house tonight. Now, this is a gift from Answers in Genesis, our friends down in Kentucky. Every year they give us gifts. And this is a combo pass to the Creation Museum as well as the Ark Encounter. It includes parking too. So the winner is?
Alex Dance.
Alex. And that's a friend of Laura's son's friend.
He's the reason I wasn't here last night.
All right. You got transportation to get down there?
Get it back.
Well, you get down there and be blessed, okay?
He's halfway there.
Yeah.
He's halfway
He's not halfway there. Another book from Bruce. Have you considered evidence beyond reasonable doubt? And the winner is?
Lisa and Tony Johnson.
All right, come on, Lisa and Tony Johnson.
I said that's part of our plan too.
Well, I'm happy for your plan. You proved yourself, amen. All right, we got another necklace give away, and the winner is?
Michael Fogle.
Come on, Michael.
Is it class?
That's all right. Come on in here. Now, he ain't gonna be wearing that. I know. So you decide, Rhonda, who gets that one. I'm really happy for the Fogle family tonight. This is their day. And so the winner is, next one is, our last one for the night is a suit, $250 towards a suit. And what's the problem? Jonathan Fogle. Wait a minute, you just won a suit.
That's what it says. That's what it says. Jonathan.
You're gonna have to find somebody in the family that you can get a suit for, but I think it's gonna be a season of time before he gets it. Well, just find somebody around in the family, or maybe your brother, somebody, and when he comes to Indianapolis, both of them come, and y'all let me know, and I'll take your money. So we're done for the night, and where is my assistant director? Come on down here, David, Liddy. We're getting ready to wrap up for the night. And again, if you want to be a blessing to the ministry, we got a box on the table. You can drop something in there and say, we want to bless this ministry. Also, there's our vendors around the auditorium. If you want to see them and get some good product, please do so. But tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, not 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, our last session here for this year. And if you bring 10 people or more, you will have opportunity to win that set and commentaries. If you got 10 or more. Okay? If you don't have 10 or more, you don't get in the drawing for that set. Okay? All right. David Liddy is our assistant executive director and the future leader of this ministry. And he's going to share and dismiss us for the night. Let's give David a great hand. The only thing you're going to lose when he takes over is he's short and I'm tall. David, you speak in this case.
All right, thank you everybody for showing up. My pastor used to say, your mind can only take as much as your butt can handle. It's been a long night. I get it. So thank you guys for showing up. Lord, I just pray to bless every mind, body, and soul in here, and a safe trip home. Bring as many as you can tomorrow night. I love the discussion tonight. Let's get the word out. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much.
Ready?
Yeah, we're
What time is it?